All right. Aaron, how's it going, man?
It's good, man. Yeah, we're just enjoying some time out at our Montana property. Got a little break between the races, so it's always nice to have a little rest, and then we'll be back into it here in a couple weeks.
Nice. Well, I just wanted to thank you for doing this. The premise of my series, Chasing Gravity, is what does it really take to race downhill? So I wanted to put together sort of a step by step guide from riding to racing or just improving your riding. So you've done it at the highest level, multiple World Cup wins. You had those dominant seasons. I think there was one where you won every World Cup but two, and then your iconic chainless run. So you're definitely the guy to ask about this. And then I should also say I've learned a lot from your YouTube channel, man. You're really good at teaching some of these concepts. So I wanted to put this together in a way that people could follow, and it's sort of a condensed version of that. So
Sweet. Sounds
yeah.
good.
So it's been about 8 years now since we first met. I met you when I won the Kamikaze, and at that time you were building your own race course in Mammoth, and I believe you won that race. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, that was a good time. I love riding out at Mammoth, and yeah, we haven't been out there for I don't know 5 or 6 years. Definitely missed it, but yeah, one of my favorite places to ride a bike. Definitely.
Yeah, in Velociraptor, that is such a unique trail. Tell me a little bit about that. And was that your first time building or?
No, I've always loved building, digging. Like I was digging jumps in the yard when I was 3 years old. Pretty much like my whole life I can remember building, and now it's building mountain bike trails, and we actually own a bike park, Windrock Bike Park out in Tennessee now. So we get to do a lot of it. But yeah, the Velociraptor track at Mammoth was that was an old track. I think that they raced for a national or something, like even 15, 20 years before we were there that year. And I was out doing some filming with Clay Porter for some stuff we were doing 2020, since that was like the COVID year. And so yeah, we were out kind of just scouting some stuff, and they showed me that trail, and I was like, dude, it's like such an epic trail. So we're just kind of bringing that thing back to life, trying to update it a little bit to be like a raceable track. I still hope that somehow we're able to race that course again and even put some more work into it, because I think it could be pretty insane. But yeah, fun weekend, man. It was cool. We did some filming, worked on the track for a week or two, got it ready for the national, and yeah, it was a fun few weeks for sure.
It'd be cool to see that as a World Cup. I mean, that is such a gnarly, unique trail. And, I don't think I've ridden a lot of different places, and that pumice in Mammoth is so unique there. You don't really find that same kind of terrain.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
100%. Yeah, it would be cool.
You have your own bike park now, Windrock, and you're digging. You've been working on that. Is that complete, or is it never complete? Or
Yeah, never complete. It's always something. We're always trying to expand, and then you just have your maintenance and your repairs when we get really big rains in Tennessee sometimes. So yeah, the work is never done out there. We have like a full-time trail crew that's always working on trails, and I don't work on them as much as I'd like to because we're busy doing other stuff. But yeah, the bike park's been going great. It's kind of become the mecca for like World Cup riders trying to train in the off season to get ready for World Cups. So a lot of the top guys live there or spend the majority of their winters training there. So that's been really cool. And then yeah, as a bike park owner, we're just trying to round out the trails, like building more like kind of blue flow trails. Want to get some green trails eventually, and just have somewhere where everybody can ride. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun, a lot of work, but yeah, we're always improving and working out there, and that's definitely the plan moving forward. We still got a lot more we want to do.
did building trails change the way that you race or the way that you look at racing?
Not really. I think the experience and the time I have racing has changed how I build trails. So I would say maybe the flip of that. Um, I think that a lot of my motocross experience definitely relays into my racing, but I think being a racer, and I really enjoy the challenge of like finding lines on the track and kind of having options. So when I'm building trails and racetracks, especially, that's always in my head. So I kind of can see how a track's going to develop, where the lines are going to be, and I really enjoy the process of like building tracks that are going to have some options. You're going to have to like turn the brain on to kind of like figure it out. There won't just be one obvious line down the middle of the track. So I think the way I ride and the way I enjoy riding definitely influences how I build.
When did you know you were ready for racing?
um, I have a weird one for me because I started racing BMX, I think at 4, and I raced till I was like 8 or 9. And even though I was really young and I only raced, when I look at it now, I'm like, that's almost no time. I was like 4 or 5 years, but in that 5 years, let's call it, we traveled all over the country. The last couple of years I was racing, doing the nationals and doing it at a really high level. And then I moved into motocross at 12, did the same thing till I was 17. And then I didn't start racing downhill until I was 20. So I kind of had like a lifetime of racing experience before I got on a downhill bike. So I think I got on the downhill bike. For me, I had some buddies of mine that were the top pros at the time here in the US that got me into riding. So I think riding with them and them kind of telling me like, hey, dude, you should come do a race. And when you race, you should just sign up for pro and start there because you're fast enough. I think for me, that was like kind of the validation and like the easy in to the door. But I obviously was just in a weird situation compared to most because I didn't kind of come through the ranks of riding downhill from like beginner, novice, intermediate, pro, because I rode at such a high level in BMX and motocross and just kind of where my strengths were. I was able to pick it up pretty quick because I've been riding two wheels kind of my whole life, So I think for me that was like step one. And then I had raced like national stuff throughout the year in 2008, which was my first year racing. And you start racing nationals and competing with some of the pro guys that are doing well at the World Cups and beating some of those guys. And I had some really good teammates on Yeti my first year racing, and a few of them, they were top 10 World Cup pros at the time. And so when they started telling me like, hey, you're ready to race a World Cup, and if you have your best run, you can be in the top 10, top 20, like straight away, like you've got the speed. So I think for me, like I just had some really good people around me that had done it and they knew where the speed was at the time. So they were able to kind of tell me like, hey, you're ready, like go for it. But I think for the average person, I think you just got to show up and kind of give it a go, as long as you can kind of control yourself. I think the first step would be making sure that you can ride the course. And I think as soon as you feel like you can make it down the course comfortably, lap after lap, even if that's not, at a really fast pace, just getting down it like smoothly and safely, then I think you're okay to race as long as you can control yourself and not get too excited and go too crazy. So I think as soon as you can just get 1 or 2 races under your belt, you can look at the times. That's what's cool, is everybody kind of races the same tracks. A lot of times there'll be a cat 2-3 track for kind of the beginner intermediate track or riders, and then a pro class, like expert class track. So I think as soon as you get a time down, you can kind of compare yourself to where you're at. And then I think begins like the learning process and goal setting and just trying to take a little bit of time off each time you race and kind of start closing that gap in on the leaders. So yeah, different for everybody, but I think that was kind of my path.
Okay. What physical or mental asset do you think is most important to World Cup racers?
I think fitness is definitely important in that it's pretty easy to ride, say 20 or 30 seconds, like all out for me at least. And I think for anybody, as long as you can mentally, like I said, control yourself and not ride above your limit. But to ride at your full capability from start to finish takes a pretty high level of fitness, especially as you get faster and you start pushing. So I think fitness comes into play in that if you're not fit enough to ride 100% top to bottom, you're either going to be taking a lot of risk as you get tired, or you're just going to be backing down and losing time. So I think fitness definitely is what allows you to maintain your top speed all the way down. And obviously, as you're stronger, you can go faster, you can pedal harder, you can take bigger impacts. You can ride faster ultimately. So it does make you faster. It also is good for protecting from the injuries a little bit when you do have crashes. If you've got some strength and some mobility and some flexibility, you tend to roll a little better when you hit the ground and sometimes get hurt a little bit less. So I think fitness is important on a lot of sides. I think that is your foundation. And then, but ultimately, like the mental side of things is I think what really separates people as you work up through the classes, and even at an amateur level for sure. Because I see a lot of riders that are really good. I do a lot of coaching as well. You see a lot of riders that can ride fast in practice, but as soon as it's a race run and they kind of get that pressure and they get that, like, they start to get anxious and they start to override, and like riding on the clock is always feels so different than just riding for fun or riding practice laps. So I think there's a lot of separation there. There's a lot of riders that have a hard time being consistent when they get on the clock because it's very easy to rush and make mistakes.
Next two questions you kind of already answered, which is what, riders should focus on first, and what actually matters early on. I think you touched upon that. Maybe if there's anything else you want to add.
Yeah, I think first focus should probably be the riding itself as far as the technique goes. I think there's no reason you can't do a little bit of all of it at the same time. So it depends on what your goals are and how kind of urgent that is. But I think the fitness should always be in play, and I'm a big believer in fitness just for life as well. So, I think obviously the fitter you are, the faster you're going to go, the safer you're going to be at the same time, and ultimately the more fun you're going to have in the sport. So I think that should always be something you're working on at some sort of level, even if it's not, getting too crazy. But yeah, I think the foundation of your bike riding skills, bike handling skills, let's call it, your technique on the bike, I think that's important because it's easy to develop bad habits. And I'm a big believer in the stronger you can build your foundation, the higher the ceiling of your abilities down the road. So if you have some really bad habits, it's going to be hard to really continue to build speed on that after a while. Whereas if you can slow down a little bit at the beginning, not rush, kind of work on your weaknesses, maybe take some classes with the right coaches to kind of make sure that there's nothing you're doing that's too kind of out of whack. I think if you can really kind of work on the technique part of riding, as you get faster, now the speed can come safely, and ultimately I think long run, you'll be a lot faster, safer rider. So yeah, but at the same time, I think there's a lot to be said. I mean, we ride mountain bikes because it's fun, and if every single time you're on your bike you're working drills and working technique and stuff, like I think there's definitely should be plenty of time to just go out and kind of turn the brain off and just have fun riding with your friends or whatever. But if you're serious about racing and getting better, the riding skills and the technique, I think, is something that definitely should be a focus.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's funny that you mentioned that because just in the last few weeks, I've had a bad habit of when I jump, I manual down the back sides of jumps because I'm too far back. And so I said, turn the ego off, turn the brain off, just go session a blue jump line and just work on your form over and over. And I was at Summit and I did blue steel for 2 days straight. And now, just yesterday, I'm on West Ridge, and I'm like, oh, this isn't so bad. This isn't so big. I know what to expect, and so that's so key, I think. And I started working out recently once I wanted to take this more serious, and I've noticed how much more abuse I can take on the bike, and obviously that's important. When you're going down pretty chunky stuff, you're just going to get fatigued and tired. So. Yeah, definitely. I know you've said this in interviews. You said you needed more strength before you felt ready, and I know you touched upon that. What kind of strength do you think matters the most?
It's a tough one. I think downhill is a really hard sport to train for, and that it's kind of like if you look at runners, for example, I think they say, I don't remember the distance, but basically that like 4 minute zone is like one of the, that like 2 to 4 minutes is kind of one of the hardest zones to train for because you're not a sprinter, that you can just go absolutely all out for 20 or 30 seconds. That's about as much as your tank will usually go if you're at a full on sprint. And it's not long enough where it turns into an endurance race where you can kind of pace yourself and kind of cruise along. Like downhill is your average run is between 2 and 4 minutes, depending on your level on the track. Maybe it gets up towards 5 and 6 on some of the big levels or big tracks. So it's kind of at this weird spot where you're kind of you kind of spike the heart rate to 100 straight out of the gate as far as like what your max is, and then you've got to just kind of like exist in that suffering zone for a few minutes. So if you're just, for example, like a cross country rider and you just go out and do big, huge, long endurance rides, you're not going to quite have that punchy power and that real explosive strength and kind of the BMX sprints, like a BMX racer where the lap times are 30 seconds. You're not going to have the endurance to kind of get you through a 4-minute run. So I think with downhill, it's unique in that you kind of need a little bit of everything. If you're just, great on cardio, but really bad on upper body strength, and you get to a track that's steep with no pedaling and really rough, cardio is great, but if you don't have the strength to hold on to the bike, you're not going to get very far. And vice versa, if you're a really strong rider, but you don't have a good gas tank under you, on the pedaling and the endurance kind of side of it, you're going to kind of blow yourself out there. So I think a mix is good. Like from my training, I do a little bit of everything. I do short sprints, stuff. I do my base rides that are usually an hour to 2 hours, especially in the off season, to kind of build your overall kind of gas tank, so to speak. And then I'm in the gym, usually 3 to 4 days a week, working strength, like upper body, lower body, kind of everything in between. So mobility as well. You've got to be able to hinge at your hips and be able to kind of hold a straight back position and a strong riding position. So I think that's what's challenging, but cool about downhill is like you got to be pretty well-rounded athlete to go fast. So I don't know that there's one that's more important than the other. I think the one that most people notice first is probably the cardio side of things, just because it is, you kind of tend to ride as fast as your cardio like top is, and then that's the thing that will kind of limit you first. But obviously, if you're not strong, then you're going to get tired quicker and the cardio is going to go away faster. So it does kind of all need to go together.
So what would be your approach to strength versus cardio?
I think they're pretty even, honestly. Like I'm usually in the gym 3 to 4 days a week, and I'm usually doing some sort of riding or cardio probably 3 to 4 days a week. So some days we're doubled up where I'm in the gym in the morning and I'm riding in the afternoon. Some days are just gym and some days are just cardio. I normally train about 6 days a week. I'm kind of like a Monday through Saturday, and I usually take Sundays off, or if we have a race or if I'm, I'll move things around a little bit. But yeah, I think a pretty even mix is pretty important. And obviously it depends on your goals, right? That's like, I have the time to do that. Racing is my career, so I can train 6 days a week and I can spend 4 or 5 hours a day training, whereas a lot of people don't have that. So I think, do what you can do. I think consistency is more important than exactly what you're doing. I think consistency over time is what makes the biggest difference. And I think, when you start doing it, you'll figure out pretty quick, like, is it my cardio that is more of a limiter? Is it my strength? Like, you'll kind of know your body and your strengths and weaknesses. So I always recommend, like, do what you can, do it consistently. That's the most important thing. And if you're going to lean heavy one way or the other, I say work on, your areas that you're weaker first. So that's kind of maybe the simple approach to it.
Okay. And when you're in the gym, yeah, I mean, most people are not going to be able to sit there and work 6 days a week like a job, but it does make sense to put the time in, even if it's, a little bit here or there. Like that's what I've been doing. And already within a month, I've noticed a huge difference. How long are your sessions in the gym? I know some people talk about, you're overworking. You don't want to be doing this many reps. You want to, so maybe go into a little bit of your actual training and like walk me through your week. Like Monday is what, and you'll go in and do what routine and for how long, just so that, we have a little bit of like a fitness, gym cheat sheet guide of what you've been doing, because you've been doing this so long. I'm sure you have so much experience in what works, what doesn't, what's a waste of time, what's more efficient, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think For me, there's a lot of variables and variance because I train similarly, but definitely a little different depending on the time of the season we're in. So sometimes I might be in the gym 4 days a week and be in there an hour and a half every time I'm in there doing bigger workouts, longer workouts. And sometimes when I'm in season, I might be in the gym once or twice a week or no times because we're traveling and at races and whatever. So maybe I'm only in there for 45 minutes, once or twice. I kind of get in what I can. So I think it depends on what you're doing, your schedule. It doesn't take much, to be honest. Like if you had an hour a day, and you don't even need an hour a day, but I mean, you can get a lot done in the gym in 30 to 45 minutes if you're kind of getting after it. You don't need to be in there for hours if you don't have the time. And like you said, if you're, real focus is on the riding and the skills and that kind of stuff, and you're naturally pretty strong, you probably don't need to be in the gym for an hour and a half. You probably should, make your training lean a little heavier towards the riding side if that's the weaker side. So I think there's a lot of variables. There's not really like a one way to do it. For me, when I'm in like off season mode and I'm say like I'm in January where I'm preseason, so I'm doing some of my hardest training of the year. But I don't really have races or anything else I'm scheduling around. I'm just at home every week, just kind of going through my biggest kind of normal steady training routine. It usually would look something like I do two upper body workouts, two lower body workouts a week a lot of times, and I kind of separate them. So a lot of times if I'm doing that type of routine, I'm going to do upper bodies like Monday, Thursday, lower body, Tuesday, Friday. If I'm combining upper and lower body, like during season more, when I have a little less time to be in the gym, maybe I switch over to like a Monday, Wednesday, Friday gym program, and I do upper and lower each time. But to do kind of big sessions of each, in January, let's call it, I would do like lower body Monday morning, and then I would do like sprints Monday evening. So I like go to the BMX track a lot of times and do sprints because I think it's more fun than sprinting on a spin bike. If I'm doing those shorter 30-second sprints, when you go to the BMX track, you can still work on skills. You've got a pump. It's not just all straight line sprinting. I think it relates over the downhill bike pretty good. So that would be Monday. Tuesday would be upper body gym in the morning, and then followed by probably like an XC ride in the evening or in the afternoon. So that's probably an hour to an hour and a half. And it just depends. Maybe it's more of a baseline like tempo ride, or maybe it's just a more of a trail ride where I'm kind of like pushing on the way up and then just riding trails on the way down. Wednesday, a lot of times will be a little bit more of a recovery type of day because I've had a big Monday, Tuesday. So it'll be maybe a longer, easier base ride, like hour and a half, just at like a zone 4 kind of tempo, heart rate. I think it's zone 4, kind of like that, like 130, 140 heart rate. Or I'll mix it up on Wednesdays and like go ride my dirt bike, like go to the moto track and ride or something. And then Thursday, I'd be back in the gym in the morning with a lower body day. If I rode Wednesday and Tuesday, maybe I'll take riding off on Thursday and just do my lower body day. Friday would be upper body, and then some sort of ride in the evening. And then Saturday is kind of like, usually I'm not in the gym Saturdays. I'm working on skills in some form. So that would usually be like a bigger trail ride or a downhill bike day where I'm out doing shuttle laps or at the bike park. If I didn't ride moto, maybe I'm riding moto Saturday, but some sort of skill building day. And then I take Sundays off. So that would be kind of a sample week. They move around all over the place all the time, depending on my schedule. But I would say that would be, kind of my normal routine. And as you can see, like what we talked about earlier, that would be 4 days in the gym and about 4 days, 4 to 5 days on two wheels of some sort. So
Okay.
yeah, sometimes I work in like some yoga sessions or some easier work, like especially as I've gotten older, like the recovery side of maintaining that level of training has got harder and harder. So I think you know, I kind of ebb and flow. I've learned to kind of tell when I'm tired, but I can just kind of keep grinding and it's going to be beneficial. And when my body's wearing down and I need to recover a little bit more because I'm just kind of tearing myself apart every day. So it's something you learn over the years.
Well, you have a lot of experience with that, so that's, I think, a good baseline of kind of what a week could look like, and you could kind of piece together, what you have time for. How many reps are you doing in, like, when you're doing a specific exercise? Usually, is it 2, 3?
Same thing there. It really depends on the time of the year. If we're early in the off season, like say in November, December, like when my season's usually over in October, I take a couple weeks pretty easy, and then I love being in the gym and training, so I usually get back in there pretty quick. But it might be some unilateral exercises, meaning like single arm, single leg stuff, and I might be doing like 15 to 20 reps per side. So higher reps, lower weight. And then I kind of start narrowing it down on the reps, over a month or two. It depends. Like I honestly change it up quite a bit. I think the body adapts pretty quick. So every couple of months, I'm kind of switching reps, switching weights. Like, and it depends on what time of the season. Like usually we're base building mode kind of November, December into January, then kind of mid-January, February, March, depending on the time of the season. Like we're starting to get into more of our strength work. So that means we're coming down in our reps. So maybe there's some times where we're closer to like 8 to 12 reps. And as we get a little closer to the season, maybe we're even dropping down to, starting at sets of 8 and then going 6, 5, 4, 3, like kind of really working on that like high end strength work, because I've already kind of built the endurance the months before. So we're kind of like, and you've just got the months of consistency on your muscles and tendons and all that stuff. So when you start pushing more weight, the body can handle it. You're not just jumping in the gym for the first time and smashing a bunch of weight. So really it depends, man. But I think overall that like kind of 8 to 12 rep range is probably where I'm at most of the time. And sometimes I'm higher, sometimes I'm lower, but I would say on average, I'm probably in that 8 to 12 kind of range a lot of times. And I'm usually not going all the way to failure. I'm usually kind of around that, like maybe 80, 90%. Like when I finish my last rep, I could do another, 2 to 4 reps if I really wanted to. And kind of staying in that range, I would say, like in general, but it definitely changes a lot depending on the time of the year.
Okay. Yeah. I meant 2 to 3 sets, but
Oh yeah.
yeah. But reps I wanted to know too. So that's great. Yeah.
Yeah. Set wise, I would say usually 3 to 5 is usually the sets I'm in. And a lot of times if it's at 5, it's like that would be that heavier strength work where I'm
Yeah.
starting, say I'm doing a couple of warm up sets, body weight stuff. Then I'm starting, squats, for example. I'm starting with 135 or something for 10 reps. And I'm trying to warm my way into doing like as much weight as I can push for say 2 to 3 reps at the end. So if you're doing something like that, it's usually closer to 5 reps because you're just like adding weight and lessening your reps each time to try to get that strength work, and you don't want to blow out in those earlier sets. But normally it's kind of like a warm up set or 2, and then followed by like 2 to 3 like working sets, usually 3. So I would say like working sets, I'm usually around 3 with some warm up before it. And then, 8 to 12 reps per set. I would say that's probably the most general zone that I'm in. And I think that's probably true for most people working out too, I think.
Okay. Yeah. I got some work to do because I'm right now doing like 10 reps in 2 sets, maybe sometimes 3. So, but I noticed that you really do have to build the base, because when I first started working out, like I had to dial it way down. But now I notice how much just in the last week, like things just kind of clicked, and I'm like adding a lot more weight. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely, it compounds, right? It's going to take time to, So
yeah. And it usually takes like, I mean, if you're really consistent working out a lot, you'll start to feel your base a little bit, usually around a month. Usually, if you're really consistent, where you're like, you actually start to feel a little strength, like you said, like you don't just feel like kind of floppy when you're in there and super tired and like nothing's quite connected yet. It's like if you can be consistent 3 to 4 days a week, after about a month, you kind of get through that real kind of crappy phase where everything's really sore all the time and everything feels hard. And it starts to feel good where you're like, okay, like I'm kind of locked into the muscles. I'm starting to feel stable. I'm not getting so sore after every workout. So yeah, that's what I always encourage people. I'm like, you got to give it a month, have some discipline. Like it gets better for sure. But that first month, you just kind of got to push through it and be consistent with it.
That's a really good point. And I think that maybe some young juniors that are starting out that haven't worked out and they're hearing this, yeah, stick with it, because exactly what you said. When I started working out again, I was hating life. I was like, I can't work out. And probably a lot of people would just quit and be like, it's too much. But you just got to, I just dialed it back and I just kept going. And yeah, the recovery time was horrible when I first started, but now it's a
Yeah.
lot better. Yeah. So it does make a difference. What are some of the exercises that riders should really focus on in the gym specifically for downhill? Because you could go and follow any routine of like biceps and, curls and, push-ups and, working on core, but like, what are specific things that you think has helped you, uh, really perform that like is the most efficient thing you can do in the gym that relates to the bike and downhill specifically?
Yeah, I think assuming that everybody's strengths and weaknesses are equal, which they're not. So you're definitely gonna have to tweak your routines around, your weaknesses. I think as you start to ride and work out consistently, those will get exposed. Like I know people that have, lower back, like weaknesses and pains, and they've really got to dial in things for that. For me, I've always been strong there. I've never one day really had like a sore lower back and had to focus on that. So for me, that's not something I need to implement into my routine a lot. I get that through my base training, and I'm just naturally strong there. But I have weaknesses in other areas I have to work on. But I would say like in general, again, like across the board, for me, I think the most important exercises are kind of the things when you think about riding, the muscles you're going to need and your big impact stuff. Like that's your foundation, let's call it. You'll have all these little other details that I think are good to hit sometimes, but in general, legs, upper body. On the legs, you think about, I guess, two things: your power, so that's your pedal power, ability to pump and push, so that's going to be stuff like squats and deadlifts, single leg squats, that kind of stuff, even leg extensions on a leg extension machine. For me, I think it's pretty good because it kind of gets the area of my legs burning where I feel it the most when I ride, for me personally. But I think squats, deadlifts, single leg squats and all that, or you know, deadlifts and all that, like any kind of form of those things, I think are all good. I think they're great too because if you can maintain posture when you're doing those exercises, meaning like you're hinging at your hips, you're keeping your back straight, that's all riding position stuff. So yeah, you're going to be working your legs and that base training of your leg strength and power, but you're getting that secondary stabilization work through your back, your core, all that kind of stuff, a bit of grip strength in there as well with deadlifts and stuff like that. So I think those are like super foundational. Obviously, like starting light, making sure you maintain like perfect posture because you can hurt yourself if you're trying to push a bunch of weight in those exercises with bad form. But those have been super foundational for me, and thankfully, I've never had an injury in the gym doing any of that stuff. I've always been very disciplined to make sure I'm not pushing too much weight before I'm ready. Building the foundation of strength and all that kind of stuff. So I would say like lower body, that's kind of where you're at. And then as far as upper body, I just think of like what are the muscles that are taking the majority of the impact. When my arms are out and I'm slamming into bumps and big G outs and really needing to maintain that position. So for me, it's like chest, shoulder strength, huge one, especially like kind of that front delt, front of shoulders, like that is your big impact, muscles when you're going to take a big slam into the bars and you got to like, maintain posture. So just that stuff that kind of maintains a strong riding posture. So back obviously is in there, but you kind of work that with other stuff. So like bent over rows, you get your push through your push up or your bench press or whatever. And then you get like a bent over row where you're like kind of straight back to the ground and you're doing like real strict rows. With my upper body too, like one thing I noticed that's helped me and I try to teach riders that I coach as well is like paying attention to your elbow positioning. I think a lot of times when you get in the gym, If you're just working out to get strong and look good and whatever, a lot of times elbow positioning can be a little bit further in. If you're doing a bent over row, for example, a lot of people kind of pull more like this, whereas you don't ride a bike like that. You ride a bike like this, and the elbows stay out wide. So if I'm doing a bench press or a bent over row or an overhead shoulder press, anything I'm doing, I make sure that I'm not kind of doing it like this. I'm really like maintaining that like riding. I call it 90-90. So it's kind of like 90-degree angle here, 90-degree angle here, and 90-degree angle like flat to your body here. So arms not in here, it's not dropped, and it's not here, right? Like this is kind of your working range that you're working through, because that's where you try to be more or less on the bike. So I find a lot of riders, especially beginner riders, that have a hard time keeping your elbows up. You can tell somebody like, hey, keep your elbows up. But if you don't have the strength and kind of the reps in the gym to do that, it's really hard to maintain that posture on the bike. So I think the gym actually gets you strong enough to be able to do that. And you're able to practice repetition in the gym a lot easier than you are on the trail, because you got a lot of things coming at you when you're riding. So anyways, probably your baseline, if you kind of touch all those areas, you're doing pretty good. And again, there's really no secrets to working out. I think consistency is way more important than the exact exercises you're doing, like 100%.
That's good to know. Yeah. And exactly what you said a few weeks ago, I was working on the elbows out thing because I have a tendency to, you know, I've been able to adapt to that riding where my elbows are a little bit more in, but I've started pushing them out. And as soon as I started doing that, I noticed, ooh, this is going to take more strength to do. So,
Yeah.
yeah. And sometimes you got to exaggerate it to get it kind of back to the good point, and so I
Yeah.
was doing that and I noticed that. So if there's anything you want to touch on with, your explosive strength, the way you're doing your intervals, how often are you also doing that on the bike where you take off for a second and you just go as hard as you can and then dial it back and then, that sort of thing. So
Yeah, I think if you're working kind of that explosive power, I think intervals are great. That's kind of what I get in at the BMX track a bit, like those all-out sprints where you're also pumping and manualing and having to work skills at the same time. You can do it on, road bike or cross country bike or anywhere. Spin bikes. A lot of times I end up doing, my longer intervals on a spin bike because I'm tracking wattage and heart rate. So I'm kind of trying to maintain a certain amount of watts at a certain heart rate for a certain length of time. So longer intervals, shorter intervals, it kind of just depends on, what are you working on when you're in the gym, working more explosive stuff. If you're trying to get more explosive, I think you can obviously do that with all the exercise you're doing, where you can kind of go down a little slower and kind of explode up, like say a 3-2, 2 to 3 second lower and a 1 second, explosion up. Like, so you can work a little bit of that. I think some of the good stuff in the gym too is like that I do are like box jumps, like a bit of plyometric work. That kind of speeds you up a little bit, can work that leg speed without working the speed and the weight kind of at the same time. So I think that's good. Sometimes I'll throw that into like the end of my workouts. When I'm done, just body weight, box jump kind of stuff. I'll go through a little bit of a routine to kind of just keep things snappy. So, yeah, again, so much variance. So I think mixing it up and just kind of paying attention to like, where am I weak? Do you feel like, oh man, once I kind of get going, I can maintain pretty good. But like if I just sprint side by side with somebody else, they're way stronger than me. It's like I just feel like I'm pretty weak, like when I just gotta like get on it 100%. And it's like, all right, maybe you tailor your training a little bit more to some shorter intervals to just try to build a bit of that speed and size in your muscles and stuff like that. Or, you feel like you're really snappy for 15 seconds, but it peels off really quick. When you just hit the wall, then it's like, okay, probably need to work in some more tempo intervals, 30 seconds, 45 seconds plus to a couple minutes, whatever, to kind of work on some of that sustained endurance type of stuff. So yeah, I think it really just depends on kind of where you're at. Also, where you're at in the season as well. Like you can definitely ramp your intervals more coming into the season. And if you're in a full race season, racing all the time, and you got that cardio, and there is a little bit of a tank. So if you're going to the races on the weekend and then just coming home and just slamming intervals in between races, like so you can wear yourself down a little bit. And also, like, if you're a week out from the race or whatever, and you're just doing loads of intervals, like, I don't think you're going to get a ton of progress in one session. So it's again, it's the consistency over time that makes the biggest difference.
And constantly evaluating yourself. I think that's a
Yeah.
takeaway is constantly be looking at, what are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? What should I work on? And then also being balanced so that you're not overdoing it before a race, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah, I think in general, when it comes to work in the gym, like exactly what you said, it's like the consistency and constantly kind of evaluating where you at, really, where your weakness is, and trying to kind of constantly make those stronger over time, I think is the path. I think it's not the fun, super exciting answer where I, say, hey, you just do these 2 exercises and they're the holy grail and you don't need to do anything else and it'll change everything about your riding. It's not how it works. I don't think anything in life really works that way. I think you have to have the discipline to be consistent and work on your weaknesses. And I always ask people, I say, because they come to me for coaching, and I definitely can give you some really good insight and some things when I work with riders. But I always say, like, what the one secret to success is that you have to know. And
Yes.
they're like, what is it? They get excited. And
There
I
is no
say,
big secrets.
exactly. There's no secret. It's a lot of hard work and it's working hard consistently. That there is no way around that path. So
Yeah.
that's what it takes.
You got to check all the boxes. You
Yeah.
can't leave something. Let's talk recovery really quick before we move on. Where and what are you doing recovery wise, and how is that helping?
I think first and foremost, when it comes to recovery, I think there are times for days off where you're just really chilling, but I think a lot of times active recovery is going to be better than just sitting on the couch all day. So I think a little bit of movement is usually better. So if it's a really easy ride or just going for a walk or, a yoga session for 20 to 30 minutes, like easy stretching, mobility, like some sort of movement, I think for me recovers me better. And I think that's true for most people. A little bit of movement's better than nothing most of the time. So I think that's first and foremost. But I think on the recovery side, yeah, it just depends. I think even if you're young, man, I look at some of these, and I know where I was even when I was 20, 22, training really hard. But it's like, yeah, you do need a little less recovery, or you can get away with less recovery when you're younger. But you can also handle a higher training volume when you're younger. So if you really want to go nuts, when you're 22, like, dude, you can get after it every day. But if you're going to go that hard every day, recovery is coming back in again because you're really pushing the limits again. So I think it's important for everybody. For me, a lot of recovery looks like recovery rides. So it's that 45-minute to an hour, 20 hour and a half, like just easy. Maybe it's zone 2 rides. I'm somehow getting this confused in my head. I think I said zone 4 earlier. But kind of that like 130 to 140 heart rate. It's basically where you can kind of maintain a conversation while, that level of cardio. If you feel like you're out of breath where you can't talk, you're going a little too hard. So those kind of what we call recovery rides or base building rides, base training rides. I think it is zone 2. I think that's I spend a bit of time there just kind of because a lot of times like I'm just hammering on my leg. So getting a good leg spin is important. And then other things for recovery for me, like yoga for sure. Like I like doing that kind of mobility, strength, stretching kind of combination. Definitely loosens me up, especially like a lot of twisting work and stuff like that. As I start to get tight, that helps me. I love doing hot colds. So like being in the sauna and then in the cold tub. I think it recovers the body, but even mentally, it's a really nice break. Like it's almost like therapeutic for me. I like to suffer as well a little bit. So it's a way to suffer that you're not hammering. Like it's just kind of a mental, like I just really enjoy those. So we're here in Montana. We got the hot springs right down the road from us. They have a killer gym and a massive sauna and cold plunge and all this stuff. So I'm in there like 4 days a week probably. And I'm usually doing like 3 rounds, probably 2 to 3 rounds, like 10 to 15 minutes in the sauna per round and 3 to 5 minutes in the cold plunge per round. So I really like doing that. If I have access to it, I have a sauna at my house, so I do that. like I said, it's a good time to just kind of like to tune out too. Like you don't have your phone or any distractions or stuff, and you just kind of like can enjoy that time. So I do a lot of that. But yeah, there's a lot of different ways. I mean, I know some guys that kind of can swim a little bit, depending on your level of cardio. It's not hard on your joints. That can be decent recovery. There's all kinds of stuff, but I think just movement is key.
I think the takeaway is that there's a lot of things that you can do, and movement is one of the biggest things. And even if that's going for a walk, whatever you're capable of doing that day, but not sitting around, always being mobile in some way.
Yeah.
What do you do to acclimate quickly when you're going to say, almost 10,000 feet and you got to race?
Unfortunately, not much. I think the fitter you are, the less you're going to suffer compared to everybody else, obviously. So I think overall base fitness is the most important, because most of the guys you're racing with are not living there. They're going to be in the same situation. So I think overall, just the higher level of fitness you have, the better you're going to be. There are some really great advantages of altitude training. Part of the reason I like being in Montana, but I've got to be here for at least 2 to 3 weeks to kind of start to see some of those advantages. Usually the second week is almost the hardest for me. So if you think like, oh, I'm going to show up 4 days before the event to acclimate myself to the altitude, that's actually kind of putting you right in the sweet spot of like the worst place you could be as far as how your body adapts to altitude. So I think it's better to show up as late as you can, or be there for at least a couple of weeks before, is kind of what I've found to be true and what I've heard from the research as well. So a lot of times, yeah, if you try to show up 3-4 days before practice, you might actually be worse than if you just showed up the night before practice and just got straight into it. So yeah, a lot of times, like I would say, if you can't be there for weeks ahead of time, then kind of don't worry about it. Just get there kind of late and do all your work as much as you can ahead of time before you get there, and you'll suffer less than everybody else. But I mean, you can get nuts if you want and be doing altitude tents and all kinds of other stuff, but it's a lot of time and a lot of money. So
Yeah.
probably not on the table for most people.
Because I've noticed that if I just go up to the downhill park and I camp out the night before, that first day is not great. And day 2, if I don't really push it, and day 2, I can push way harder and I feel a lot better. So I'm wondering if there is that tight window. I'm going to look into that more. And I think other people could look into that too. That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I think you've got around, and I could be totally wrong, so definitely fact check this, but I think you've got about a 4-day window, and then it starts getting worse for maybe another 5 days or a week, and then it turns around and starts getting better again. So I think you're kind of like, better in those first 3 to 4 days, and then it kind of starts to go downhill even more. And then after, I think, 2 weeks or so, then you actually get the advantages of being at altitude and the body adapts, and then you actually have an advantage, but it takes a while.
Okay, cool. That leads me into a few more questions that were pretty much already answered, which is, what do you do to prepare for long tracks? What changes when the course starts to beat you up? But it sounds like that's kind of, we talked about fitness, and it's just preparing in those ways. So that's, yeah.
Yeah, longer tracks could be a little more endurance focused. Obviously, if you've got a track that's short with a ton of pedaling, then you might adapt your training a little bit towards that. If it's a track that has loads of pedaling in general, then you're probably going to be really heavy on the intervals and the pedaling and stuff like that. For you specifically, racing Big Bear for that national, that is one of the harder tracks fitness wise on the schedule for the year, I think, because you have altitude. It's a little bit longer, not super long, but it's difficult in that there's like a decent pedal at the top of the track and a decent like bit of pedaling at the bottom of the track. So when you get out of the gate there, the top of the track's pretty flat. So you've got to do some sprinting straight away. So you get the heart rate up really fast there, and then you go into all the technical stuff in the middle of the track. So you've got to be able to like kind of recover through the middle of the track when you're riding all that gnarly stuff. Like you've got to be able to go into that pretty maxed out as far as heart rate goes. And then once you get through all that, you've got to be strong enough to like put in another sprint at the bottom of the track. So it's like all your technical stuff's in the middle with a sprint at the beginning and a sprint at the end. Those are like the hardest tracks physically to race. So yeah, you kind of got to be pretty good everywhere. But I would say definitely there is more of a cardio track than some of the other tracks. And you've got to be able to smash on the pedals when you're already kind of maxed out on the heart rate.
Good to know. I'm glad I picked an easy one to
you
start
picked
out.
an easy one. Yeah.
So let's go into nutrition. So I've been getting very strict on my nutrition. I've been learning a lot in the last even just few years. And even things that have helped me in workouts. So I'm very curious. Let's start with like diet. What do you eat? What's your week look like?
In general, again, there's levels to this stuff depending how crazy you want to get. But I think in general, whole food is number one, right? Not eating processed foods and sugars. Like if you can cut that out and just in general, when you go to the grocery store, shop around the outside of the grocery store and try to stay out of the inside aisles is like a pretty decent rule of thumb. You know, you might get some oats and stuff like that from the middle, but for the most part, if you can eat whole foods, you know, like your proteins coming from meat, you get your fruits, vegetables, carbs out of, you know, potatoes and rice and stuff like that. Like just whole food, I think is if you start there and you're not eating processed foods and sugars, you're probably better than, you know, 90% of people. So I think that's probably the biggest one. And then after that, it's just, having the fuel for the amount of work you're doing. So making sure you're not under eating. So having, you know, enough carbs and stuff on board when you're going into these workouts. And especially if you're training, you know, consistently, then you've got to be eating consistently to kind of have that energy day after day and to rebuild. So obviously on the rebuild side, protein's super important. I think when you're doing really hard efforts, you can just go on ChatGPT and say, here's my weight. Here's my body fat percentage even, but you don't even need that. You can say my age, my weight, this is the type of training I'm doing every week. How much should I be eating? And, you know, if you want to lose 10 pounds at the same time, you know, put that on there. What do you think? And it's pretty incredible. Like it'll get you 95% of the way there probably. So there's so much resources available now online that it's, if you want to kind of dial things in, you can put it together. So I would say that's important. And another huge thing that I think is important is just hydration. Making sure you're hydrated, especially if you're working out all the time. If it's hot in the summer, if you're at altitude, like in Big Bear, hydration is super key, starting earlier in the morning. When you get up, and sometimes that means not just water, you know, you're adding a hydration mix or at least some salt or something like that. That's definitely like a big part of it. So I would say in general, that's covering most of your bases if you do all that.
Yeah.
There's supplementing and all that stuff as well, but
on what you said about eating, you know, foods that are basically on the outside of the grocery store. The one thing that I've always kind of kept in my mind is if you have to unwrap it, it's not food. So, you know, that kind of goes into the whole process thing, you know, but it's as strict as you want to get. I feel like when I am training a lot and I am more fit and I am pedaling all day, I can almost eat anything that I want and my body's going to adapt. But, you know, if you want to have a good baseline, that's a good place to start. Is just you know, eat a friend of mine that's a doctor. He's like, eat a wide variety of unprocessed foods, you know, and that pretty much covers most of your bases. So, do you drink coffee? Do you do caffeine?
Yeah, I do. I do that more for enjoyment than I do for energy. I think I do a little bit of caffeine before my race runs. And by default, I do a bit before practice just because I drink coffee in the morning and practices are usually in the mornings. So I drink usually essentially like two coffees a day, like one in the morning, one in the afternoon. But again, I drink it more just because I really enjoy it. Like I have a hot coffee in the morning and an iced coffee in the afternoons, and it's just part of life that I enjoy. Normally, if it's performance based, I actually drink a little bit of Red Bull before my race runs. And I've honestly only started doing that a little bit more recently because I just, like most people, when you wait around all day after practice at a downhill race, usually you're like in the pits for hours before you actually go up for your race run. And so it's like later afternoon, if it's hot, when I get nervous, which I always have nerves going before my race runs, it also makes me a bit tired. Like it's always funny because you're getting ready to go do like what you've been training to do, and you're just yawning the whole time, and you're tired, and the body's like, so just to get a little bit of sharpness. And I think the research supports like caffeine helping, that focus obviously, and a little bit of that intensity in those types of workouts. I have to be careful because if I have too much of it, it goes the opposite direction really quick, where like I get jittery and my heart rate's like way up there, and I feel like my head gets really hot. I get like nauseous feeling when I do really high end interval work after drinking too much caffeine. So I might have a quarter to a half of a Red Bull or something with a little bit of, caffeine. Generally it's that, because I can just stomach it. It tastes good to me, like when I'm in that sort of zone, and not all foods taste good. So I'll usually maybe do that like 45 minutes out from my race run, something like that. Just a little bit, just to kind of pick me up. The other thing it helps with is I get pretty bad like dry mouth when I'm like nervous as well. So when I'm at the top of the hill, especially at Big Bear, where it's a really dry environment, you're high altitude, you're nervous. I'm doing like my 20 to 30 minute warm up at the top of the hill on the spin bike before my race run. My mouth will be like super dry. So Red Bull compared to like water, it kind of like coats my throat and my mouth a little bit, so that when I'm in my run, I'm not just like feel like I got sand in my mouth. So that's another little thing it kind of helps me with. But yeah, everybody's different. I think you got to find your mix. But yeah, usually a bit of a sports drink or a little bit of like hydration mix with something like that, like in my water. That goes a long ways. But yeah, caffeine, long-winded answer, but yeah, 2 coffees a day usually. But again, more for enjoyment than for than for performance.
Gotcha. Yeah, I usually drink a cup in the morning to kind of wake up a little bit, but I don't do more than that because I don't want to be jittery. I'm kind of a coffee snob, so I'll do the pour over. I get all into it. It's like a ritual for me.
I'm the same. Yeah. Same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey guys, so I've been pretty selective with the brands that I wanted to work with this project and the channel. And I wanted to find brands that I could partner with that I actually believed in their product. Rise Coffee for me checks all those boxes. Recently, I've been experimenting with really upping my health game, and I've been using functional mushrooms. They really help me have energy during the day when I'm riding, and also help me sleep better at night. And I'm a huge coffee fan, so to combine both of those things to me was a no-brainer. What I love about Rise Coffee is they have these great flavors, and they even have these travel packs that you can bring with you to a race, or if you're doing a trip with your friends. If you want to try out Rise Coffee for yourself, there'll be a link in the description, and you can put in the code UNPAVEDTV, and that will save you 10%. And honestly, will really help me grow this channel so I can keep bringing you quality content that you want to see. Something that's really surprised me, and there's a lot of studies on this right now, cognitive and performance wise, is creatine.
Yep.
And I started off with 10 grams, I believe. I think that's right. 10 grams for like a couple weeks. And now I'm just doing a maintenance dose of 5 grams. And I notice I can work out so much harder in the gym when I do a protein shake I usually do a banana. I'll do pure whey isolate, which is really kind of OCD, but I feel like the unflavored pure whey isolate is the best form of protein you could get from like a whey product. And then I'll do a banana and a little bit of honey, some creatine. I've been doing some like bone matrix, which is like supposed to help with like joints and things like that. And then I'll go work out, and I can get so much better of a workout by doing that than I could without the creatine and that. So Do you have a shake that you do or something that, before you go work out that really kind of gets you in that mode to really, have the power you want?
Yeah, I think yeah, I mentioned supplements earlier, and I obviously everybody's got to figure out what works for them, but I think the research supports safely across the board from what I've seen. Creatine being pretty beneficial for like everybody. Obviously, you got to dose it according to where you're at, but I think as far as muscle recovery goes and all that kind of stuff, there's even cognitive benefits as well. But yeah, I supplement with creatine daily. That's one of the things I take all the time. I also take like an omega pill and a couple other things, kind of depending on where I'm at. I get blood work done almost quarterly. I have like a I don't want to call her a nutritionist. She's a functional. I don't know. I don't want to limit her because she does a lot of stuff. She's been awesome. But I work with her. We do blood work usually every quarter, so we kind of see where I'm at. Because if you just start throwing vitamins and supplements, like a lot of times it's not stuff you need, or if you don't have the foundation in your body that's supposed to naturally create that, and you're just throwing stuff on top of it, it's not really absorbing or working. I think a lot of that is kind of useless unless you really know what you're trying to do, what you're deficient in, and have a game plan. But I do think creatine is super consistent, beneficial for everybody. The rest of it, I think, is more individualized, probably. But yeah, on the protein side of things, I try to get as much as I can from whole food, but protein is that one thing to kind of hit the amount of protein you kind of want to get every day. At least for me, it's pretty hard to do through meals. You got to eat a lot. So if you're training a lot, especially right after a workout, that's where it's like, that 30-40 minute window that I mentioned. A lot of times it's hard to like rip back from the gym and cook a meal with 40 grams of protein plus, in 30 minutes from, your last set. So that's where like I'll take a protein shake with me. I'm usually drinking protein shakes on the backside, not the front side. I actually don't do very good with shakes before I work out or ride. Like if I pound a protein shake and then go in the gym, it's just like too much liquid. It's just kind of like bubbling around in there. So again, everybody is totally different. I know plenty of really good athletes that have a massive shake and go straight to a ride or a gym, every single day. But for me, I usually have like eggs in the morning and maybe, oats or a little bit of like good sourdough bread or something like that. That just sits a little lighter with me. And then I have a little bit of like, I might have my shake on the backside. But yeah, my signature shake, so to speak, is probably some form of chocolate protein. I actually have this grass-fed beef protein right now that's not a whey that I think is pretty good. Doesn't taste quite as good, but yeah, usually some sort of chocolate whey protein. You got to be careful on the what they use to sweeten proteins
Yep.
with as well. Like make sure you get a good protein because a lot of them kind of got a lot of crap in them. So fewer ingredients, the better, especially with whatever they sweeten it with. Try to stay away from some of those bad sweeteners. But yeah, chocolate protein, a banana for sure. And then I usually do oats and peanut butter. So I add oats just to get a little more carbs. And it's also a carb source that'll burn a little slower than a banana. So, if I'm getting that shake in and then kind of going about the rest of my day, I want it to sustain a little bit more if I've got training later or whatever. So I add a little bit of oats. Peanut butter, you get a little bit of fats, maybe not the healthiest fat ever, but it's a decent. And I just think peanut butter, banana, chocolate shakes taste amazing. So I add peanut butter. And then, yeah, usually a scoop of creatine in there. That's usually my go-to, and some ice.
Okay, nice. I'll have to try the oats. I haven't done that, but yeah, that's why I went to pure whey isolate that's
Yep.
unflavored, and then I'll
Yeah.
flavor it with the honey or whatever myself. I've always had issues, stomach issues, and since I started doing that and drinking raw milk, so I'll
Yep.
pour the raw milk in the shake and do that. There's good bacteria there. There's also a brand that pasteurizes the milk, but just does the first step and doesn't
Mhm.
homogenize it and do the ultra pasteurization. And that also works for me too. So I've been doing that. And then after a workout, have you tried doing 2 cans of tuna in a bell pepper and you eat it like that's like my go-to. So
Yeah, no, it sounds pretty good though. I do tuna sometimes to mix it up. I like I'll do the tuna. I'll just make like tuna salad basically, where it's like tuna. I'll use a little bit of that like avocado mayonnaise, and I've been getting really into pickles as I've gotten older. I used to hate them as a kid. Now I really like them, especially like the spicy pickles. So I'll chop some of those up in there, and I do that sometimes. But yeah, usually post workout is when I'm trying to get usually my bigger meal. Like I eat a little lighter in the morning so I don't feel heavy during my ride or my workout, especially if I'm going to be riding or working out pretty close to my meal, like within an hour. I get stuff that just digests easy, so it's usually eggs and oats at the races, and I put like a little bit of peanut butter and honey in my oats or like oatmeal in the morning. That's pretty much like my race food, every
Okay.
day when I'm at the races. And then usually after my riding, I try to get like a decent meal in. Especially if I'm not doing much else after that, if I have time, it's either a protein shake and then a gap and then the meal, or if I do have time for the meal, it's usually the meal. And I'm pretty consistent, at least at the races. I just have rice, some sort of protein. Usually it's ground beef or chicken, sometimes tuna, and avocado. So you got your proteins, your fats, your carbs, and yeah, that's kind of go to a lot of times if I've got more time or whatever. Like sweet potatoes are a good kind of slower building, good carb as well. But yeah, I don't really have like a super go to. I definitely mix it up at the races. I'm super repetitive just because we're traveling and you just want food that's going to digest that well. So
Yeah.
I'm like eggs and oats and rice and ground beef and avocado like almost every day. That's like breakfast and lunch, and then dinners kind of move around a little bit. But when I'm at home, yeah, we definitely mix it up a bit.
That was a big question. So I'm going to follow that for sure for racing. And, camping out or whatever, I think I'm going to pre-prepare it and, have everything ready to go and just be strict about that. Cause, you can mix it up any other time, but during racing, yeah, that's really important, right? Because if you're spending a ton of time digesting your food, you're losing energy. Your body is using that energy to digest the food, and you want that for riding, obviously, racing. So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and stuff that's just clean and tastes good, during race day. Like a lot of times, when you got the nerves going, for me, it's like not everything sounds good. I'm definitely not as bad as a lot of riders. Like I can still eat like full meals on race day and stuff. I usually don't have big meals because I kind of want to keep the energy a little more available. But I just eat stuff that's easy to eat when you're kind of nervous. And for me, like a rice, protein, avocado is really easy. We even have like anywhere you stay or whatever. Even if you can get, if you really want to simplify it, you get like 90-second bags of rice, and you just add, if you want to cook ground beef, you can, or you could add tuna if you want, and avocado. Like you're almost not even cooking, and it might take
Yeah.
you 2 minutes to make that whole meal. And it's easy to eat. It's kind of got everything you need. Like, so you got to play around with it a little bit. Everybody's a little different, but I think for me, yeah, that simple equation when, we're traveling in other countries and it's harder to cook and harder to get consistent food, you can pretty much always find those three things. So you
Yeah.
kind of run that program.
Depending on where you go, you don't know what, you can't control it as much, so to be able to have the ability to do that. And a lot of races, like most of them, you're just driving to a parking lot and you're camping out there. There's no amenities, so you got to kind
Yeah.
of bring your own stuff. So that's easy. Cook a bunch of ground beef at home, cook some rice, that's half the battle right there. And then you got your avocado, and yeah.
Yeah,
So
you throw avocado and some like salt on there, and I'm like, dude, I like that meal. Like, I'll eat that meal all day long, every day. I don't have
nice.
any issue.
Yeah, I've been doing sardines too. So whenever
Yeah,
I'm going to train, I'll bring just like I'll go to Costco and I'll get that huge pack of sardines and just have that in the car. It doesn't go bad. I can just eat that, no problem. Could eat that with some chips or whatever.
yeah.
So yeah, yeah. All right, moving on from there. Actually, one other question. Beetroot. Do you take a beetroot supplement? Because that actually is supposed to increase your endurance. It allows you to get more oxygen in the blood. I started doing that. I do feel like I noticed a difference. What you were saying about is you can take so many different supplements and waste a bunch of money pretty much. I've been trying to dial it down to what do I notice when I take? So
Yeah.
and it's tough, right? Because like, how are you going to scientifically control that? But I found I take this bone and joint Irwin's Naturals, I think is what it is. And it's like this, it's like an omega with a bunch of other stuff. And I do notice how much more I'm less achy in the joints and things like that. So I've been only taking a few supplements, and the ones I'm taking, I think, are starting to really make a difference. And then,
Mm-hmm.
so beetroot was another one I wanted to ask you about, especially because of the oxygen and.
Yeah, I haven't taken it, but I was actually but I'm aware of it, and I do know that other athletes and riders do take it. And I know I was just chatting with a, a another like top rider's dad actually the other day, and he's working on a supplement that combines that with some other stuff, and he was sending it to me to try. And so it is something I've thought about a little bit and wanted to have the time to really like test through it. But yeah, I'm same mindset as you. Like I try not to just throw all kinds of crap at things. I think the consistency and checking all those boxes is more important than like any single supplement. But when you do, if you are checking every single box and you want to get the absolute most you can out of your performance, then I think digging into a couple of these areas is potentially worth it for sure. So yeah, I haven't taken it myself, but I'm aware of the benefits, and I do know other athletes that take it, and I've been curious to try it, but I want to try it in a setting where I can do it consistently, during my training at home, and kind
Mhm.
of like see like, is this actually really helping me, or is it, not? But yeah, I mean, I think it's worth giving a look at for sure.
If you are eating, like we're talking about, a good diet of unprocessed foods, you will get a lot of those nutrients and supplements that they're trying to sell you. And
Yep.
and you're going to get it in a much better way of absorption than you will a pill. So that's where I'm at, is like diet is first, and then, like things like beetroot, that is tough, right? Like to actually you'd have to eat a lot of beets. Um, some supplements make more sense. So yeah.
Yeah, and I know with the beet stuff, you can get you just get that like beetroot juice and stuff. That's
Yeah.
usually I think what people are drinking. But yeah, like you said, I think consistency. There's a lot of products out there, and for a lot of people, I'm like, okay, you can take this one supplement, but if you're sleeping like crap every night and eating trash, like you're leaving way more on the table over here than you are by not taking this one supplement. So it's really like checking the foundational stuff. I think a lot of people, the foundation is inconsistent and bad, and then you try to throw supplements on top of that. And I get it, life's busy and it's hard to be that disciplined, but if you're serious about the performance, it's got to be reversed. You've got to check all those foundational boxes. Sleep is another one worth mentioning when it comes to recovery. When we talked about it, I forgot to mention it, but I think that's almost more important than anything, like especially as you get older too. But when you're younger, like you just can't skip sleep. Like if you're sleeping good every night, that's going to do more for your recovery than I feel like any supplement ever could. So yeah, but like I said, if you're checking every single box and you want to get the absolute most, you're looking for those like small percentages of advantages. Yeah, I think it's worth checking some of those things out.
Going into sleep really quick. What's your routine? Do you shut your phone off at a certain time? Are you very strict about that?
I'm working on it. I think I'm not great about it. I've got a list actually here in Montana of things I've been wanting to do, and yeah, I'm definitely like on my phone before bed. I'm usually not on my phone scrolling before bed. Like I might be reading or researching something or just watching a show or something. Like a lot of times I just kind of put a show on in the background before I go to bed. It's just like it's most of the time it's shows I've already seen. I just kind of whatever. They're just kind of fun to watch and kind of chill out. I always make sure I like put my screens on like nighttime mode or
Yes.
whatever before I'm on it at the very
Yes.
least. So I do that and just try to like wind down a bit, but I'm yeah, usually not on my phone, just like scrolling Instagram or whatever. I tried really not to do that. And even same thing in the morning now when I get up, I try to get up, get some breakfast. Here in Montana, we have like an epic view, basically from the porch. I don't
Oh
know if you can
wow,
see it,
that's
but
gorgeous. Yeah.
so we get up, sit on the porch in the sun, eat my food, like try to start my days that way. Before I start working or getting on my phone or any of that kind of stuff. So, but yeah, I think obviously like if you can read before you go to bed and do some other stuff is usually kind of the best. But
Yeah.
yeah,
I've noticed a big difference too, putting it on the mode where your phone turns yellow and you cut all that blue light. It kind
yeah,
of makes you tired, and then you turn your brightness way down. And as you mentioned, there's certain types of social media that will spike your dopamine, and you don't want that because that will keep you awake. So
yeah,
I've even found, and maybe it's placebo, I don't know. I found I even get a better night's sleep if I just shut my phone off completely. So there's
yeah,
no, I don't know if it's true or not, but it just seems like that just works a little bit better. So it's like
yeah.
focused
Yeah,
sleep.
for sure. I always put my phone in like airplane mode and turn off like the Bluetooth and Wi-Fi and all that stuff. And try to get it a little bit away from me when it's time to go to bed.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah. I noticed when I'm camping out too, and I'll go up to Big Bear, for example, because that's kind of the closest place that I go to train. I like to travel a lot, but that's the like quick go to weekend place.
yeah,
And if I don't get a good night's sleep, sleeping in whether you're in a tent or a car or whatever the situation is, the next day is horrible. Sometimes I wreck more. Sometimes like, it's crazy. Like it compounds and it
yeah,
feels absolutely horrible. And then that night I'm like, okay, I got to get a good night's sleep, and I'll go to bed way earlier than I would. I wake up the next day. It's like a completely different day. So yeah, sleep, huge importance, I think. So moving on now to the bike, what does your bike training look like during the week? What would it maybe look like for someone that's not a pro, that's aspiring to be like a junior that can't, train as much as you? What would you kind of condense that down to? How many days on the bike?
yeah. As far as on the bike training, I think you just do what you can do. If you can't ride uh downhill, 2 to 3 days a week, can you ride once a week and ride your trail bike for 2 days a week? Or can you ride your trail bike 3 days a week and ride downhill, once every other week? Like I would just say like you kind of take like where you want to be and then just but what's realistic, what can you do, and just get as close as you can. I don't think there's like a magical equation or number. It's just do what you can when you can do it. And again, like I think consistency is the most important. So if you can set up a routine that's maybe a little less than what you would like to be doing, but you can do it every single week, I think that's going to be more important and better long term than doing a ton one week and then doing nothing for a week, like being super inconsistent. So I think you do what you can, get as close to your ideal setup as what you can manage with your lifestyle, and then kind of call it good.
So a good, say, week would be you go up to the downhill park, maybe you ride the lifts for a day or two. And then one day maybe do a cross country ride on your trail bike and get that cardio fitness side more, where you're
Yeah,
climbing and things like that. So, and
totally.
yeah,
Yeah, and skill building as well. I mean, it's like for kids, it's like you can go. There's so many places that have those like really nice asphalt pump tracks in town now. It's like, dude, if you can go ride that once or twice a week, that's going to do a ton for your skill building and your fitness. Like, no matter how fit you think you are, do a 3 to 5 lap all out interval on a pump track as fast as you can go, and you're gonna feel pretty horrible.
yeah,
I think that's one of the best forms of training you can do for downhill, because you can absolutely destroy yourself in about a minute without ever pedaling, which is kind of what downhill feels like. So, yeah, ride a pump track, ride dirt jumps, ride cross country, go build 3 turns on the side of a hill in somebody's yard and session those over and over again. Like, go to the BMX track, ride your dirt bike, ride a pit bike, ride like there's so many different things you can do. So yeah, I mean the options are wide open. I think it keeps it fun as well. It's working different types of skills, which I think obviously skill building is great. If you're just doing like cross country rides on a flat trail all the time, it's like might be decent for some fitness, but skill work wise, like try to add in some other stuff. Like, just kind of do the best you can with what you have, and don't be afraid to kind of mix it up a little bit.
yeah. And you have an amazing video on the pump track, which I'll link in this section because you can watch that, and you've gone into detail about that. So that was pretty good. Um, that's another thing that's just great about downhill is it's a wide variety of riding. I feel like that's the pinnacle because, you have the fitness side, you have the technical side, you have the jumping side, all that goes hand in hand. So any kind of training that's a wide variety of training is going to help in downhill. Right.
Yep.
Now I noticed, especially with a lot of the stuff that I see from, you're all on the downhill bike, you're on the dual crown. And I built my first like real race bike this year, and you can't pedal that thing. 7 gears, no dropper post. It's brutal. So, unless you're at the downhill park riding the lift. So, what are you doing? Are you shuttling? Are you just hiking stuff? Are you just, finding lift access? I mean, you want to be on that bike, right? Because that's the bike you want it to be an extension of you. And if you're riding all these different bikes all the time, when you do get on the downhill bike, it's going to be a little bit more alien. So what would you recommend, or what would you do to kind of like get as much time on that? Or do you think it's not that important? Maybe
I think it depends on the rider. If you've never really spent a lot of time on a downhill bike and you've only ridden short travel bikes, then yeah, downhill bike is a completely different experience. So I would say getting more time on the downhill bike. Easiest way to do that is just to obviously be at a bike park with either a shuttle or a chairlift. You're just going to get the most amount of laps in the least amount of time, like the most bike time. Which I think is great, but it really depends. Like for me, I've ridden downhill for so long and I know the bikes so well. I've kind of historically probably ridden downhill less than a lot of other World Cup riders. Like I train a ton. But even being in SoCal where, most of my riding career was spent, I didn't live, until only the last few years Big Bear opened. And it was like hours away. So we actually bought a condo up there and Airbnb'd it when we weren't there. But I would go up and ride and train on the weekends because that was the only place you could really ride in the summertime. Everything else gets so like overgrown. So I definitely rode less than a lot of other guys did as far as on the actual downhill bike, but I was riding everything else all the time, and I can just jump on the downhill bike and adapt really quick because I've just ridden it forever. And that's still, I would say, the case. I'm fortunate now we own Windrock. We have a little house out there next to the bike park. We live in Nashville primarily, but and the downhill, there is no downhill there. So Windrock's a couple of hours away. I do most of my training there and get my shuttle days in. So yeah, it just depends. Like I think in your situation, like riding downhill more would be good just because you're getting comfortable on that bike. Like you're learning how that bike reacts. Like you even mentioned earlier, when you jump, the front end comes up. That's definitely a downhill bike versus a trail bike type of thing because trail bikes are pretty kicky and downhill bikes usually fly a little more level. So it's like easy for that to happen. So there's just like little things that are going to feel a lot different on a downhill bike than a trail bike. And if you're not used to that, then obviously more time is good. But again, kind of depends on where you're at. For myself, because I've ridden for so long, I don't need as much. I know like with Asa Vermet, my teammate on Frameworks, he lives in Colorado, same as I did for the first few years of my career, and there's snow on the ground all year long. So that kid rides trail bikes and dirt bikes like all the time and pretty much doesn't touch his downhill bike for like months at a time. Like, like I think this off season, he from the last World Cup, sorry about that. I don't know how to turn that off, but I don't think he even rode for most of the off season. Then he came to California team camp and we rode like a ton for like a week and a half. And then didn't ride till hardline and then rode a lot, like 2 weeks, almost every single day at hardline. And then afterwards when we test, and then didn't really ride till the next race. And then, cause there's snow on the ground till usually this time of the year. So he's on his downhill bike very little outside of the races, but usually when he goes to race, he'll show up a week early or something and ride a bunch and then race and then ride on the backside and then go home. So, but he's not at home, and neither am I really like just pounding loads of laps, in between. But for us, we can get on the downhill bike. We know the bike. We're doing our testing. We have our big training camp, so we know we're going to be dialed there. So it's more important just to stay up on the skills and the training and all the other things. But yeah, I think again, work on your weaknesses, whatever you think you need more of. If you're bike testing, if you're trying to figure out your bike setup on the downhill bike specifically, earlier in the season, or if we're working through some issues or something, then I definitely spend a lot more time on the downhill bike as well, just trying to figure out my setup. But if I feel like the setup's good and I feel really comfortable, then, I don't try to ride so much on the downhill bike. The other thing to consider a little bit too is, and again, everybody's different. I know some riders that just do tons of fast laps all the time. Like somebody like a Ryan Pinkerton or something, like he just does like 6 wide open laps and then like goes home and rides like super consistent, every week. And some guys won't ride for, weeks at a time. I think it depends on the type of rider you are. But for me, just riding the same tracks over and over and over on the downhill bike past a certain point, because I've done it for so long, I'm only going to push so far in a practice situation before you just start taking a lot of risk for what you're trying to get out of it. And if it's not if I don't feel like I'm going to get a lot out of it, I don't want to take that risk, and I don't want to just be pushing the limit all the time when I'm practicing. So that's another thing I kind of consider too. Like when I'm riding, I'm pretty cautious of how hard I push and when I choose to push on the bike, because that's kind of the quickest way to derail progress, is having an injury. Because a lot of times, like, the riding stops, the gym work stops, everything at least gets heavily disrupted for months at a time if you have injuries. So that I just try to be smart when I'm on the bike to make good decisions.
I've seen you in the lift line. It's no summit. And I'm like, hey, what's up, Aaron? What are you doing differently? Like, are you just out there having a good time riding, having fun, just putting in the laps, running Miracle, running the race course, 10 ply. Like, if you're not familiar with this place, it could be anywhere in your downhill park that you're just doing laps. But what are you doing differently from a rider at your level to the average rider that's there? And then, because you're good at answering like multiple questions at once, I just realized, like, when I go now and I'm trying to train and I'm doing Miracle, I will end up running into people that are not riding at the speed that I'm riding at, like, my comfortability, and it completely slows down what I'm doing. And, you got to be respectful, slow down, but what are you doing in that situation? Are you going to find the more gnarly tracks that less people are going to be there? Because, you're at a downhill park, you're at a public place. And, how do you train in a place like that, which is where most people will be training, right? Including myself. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it depends on the day. Again, like some days when I'm out riding, my only goal is just to have fun, and I'll just do West Ridge laps all day long, up there, which is their really long jump trail. Like, it's super fun. I'll just do jump laps all day. You're working on your bike skills. You're still getting a base of fitness, because that's like a 4+ minute long trail. So you're kind of like logging base rides almost. Even though you're not sprinting and all that stuff, you're working on bike handling skills and just having fun. But if I'm there for, 3 days or something, and I'm like, okay, like today I want to really work on downhill laps. Like, this is going to be my focus, and I'm going to take 10 ply, for example. That's the national racetrack there that you'll be racing. And I just want to like have a focused day. Then I'll set aside a couple hours to put in, I'm usually not the guy that's going to go do 15 laps on a track like that. Again, just to kind of manage risk, I'll usually do like 5 to 8. At a public bike park on a track like that track's a little sketchy to ride really fast a lot too. So, I might do more like 5 or 6. And usually my first lap is going to be a very slow roll lap. Like, I want to kind of like where the line's at, kind of figure out where I'm going to be going. Like, if there's any, because that track isn't prepped every single day either. If there's some gnarly, like, loose rocks right in the middle of the track, I'll kick those out of the way. Like, just kind of get eyes on everything before I start picking up the pace. And then I'll just kind of start like slowly building the pace. If it's a track like that, when we used to live there, I know the trail really well, so I can go real fast straight away. It's not going to take me 5 laps to get up to speed. It might take me 2. But a lot of times I do a sight lap for sure, because I kind of want to know where the lines. That's a big part of going fast in general. If you're trying to race, is like going slow enough at the beginning of practice and doing track walk and all those things, so you can actually see where you're going and not just being wide open and just riding through crap that you don't know where you're at. But yeah, it just depends on the weekend, you know. I don't know that honestly I'm doing anything super different when I'm riding than a lot of people in that, like, when I want to focus and ride, if I have a goal in mind, if I'm bike testing, you know, or if I'm just like working on some technique or maybe trying to keep my eyes up in certain things, or I'm just trying to train the race fitness, you know, and I just want to do 5 laps on the racetrack. Like, I'm always working on something different. So I'll have my focus sessions, and then I definitely have my days where I'm just out riding for fun, or a bit of both. Like, I'm going to do some focus laps in the morning, and then once I'm done with that, I'm just going to go ride jump laps the rest of the day. So I think all of it works. I think as far as like catching people on trail, that's just part of riding in a bike park, you know, like everybody's kind of been that slow rider at a time. So at the end of the day, like, I'm usually not practicing where I'm like trying to beat my time every lap. I know some riders practice on the clock a lot. I don't really. So if somebody slows me down for 2 turns or 3 turns before they get out of the way, I don't really care. You know, like it's a little like, like kind of messes up your flow. But then I make it a goal to be like, all right, how fast can you get right back into the same space once you get by? Because that's what happens in racing sometimes, is you jack a corner up or you get way offline and you've got to refocus. So, yeah, I think in bike parks, you can only go, you know, so fast sometimes. If you're catching up to people, you don't want to be running them over and be that guy yelling at people when you're going down a bike park trail. Like, I always kind of laugh at the people that are super aggro like that. But yeah, so I think having patience for people, and obviously that's what you get. If you don't want to do that, you know, then go to a race and be on the clock by yourself. So yeah, it's part of riding in bike parks, you know, try to ride the trails that have less people, and you just gotta be patient. It's part of the deal.
Yeah, and that energy can get in your head. So even if you're the guy that's, oh, you're in my way, like that can get in your own head and take you and break your focus. So yeah, it's always good to just be as calm as possible and relaxed. And it happens. This weekend was super busy, and we were doing laps, and I get to a certain section and it's like, okay, all right, well, that's next lap. So yeah,
Yep.
and I was curious, do you just go ride 10 ply? Because you're not going to find that very many people on 10 ply sessioning that.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah.
You know, just depends on what you're working on. If you're trying to work on jumps, you know, like you talked about, and that's the trail you want to work on, then it's like, great, work on it. And you just know, like, you might miss some opportunities because you might just happen to catch somebody slower and like the one jump you're trying to work on. And it's like, that's just how it goes. Like,
Yeah.
if you want, you can push back up and session it, or you just do laps, you know. It's just part of riding in the bike park.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the fitness on West Ridge, especially at the end, you're just cooked, like that's a long run. If you're not stopping, especially,
Yeah.
so so when do you start pushing for racing? So, I'm doing 10 ply, and like you said, and this could be any course, this could be any race. My first lap, I didn't hit any of the features. I just looked at everything. I kind of rolled everything, like you said. Are you doing that too before? And then, when do you finally go, okay, I'm training, I want to get there. When do you start pushing it? Because as soon as you start pushing it on a double black diamond, everything can go wrong. If you start gapping features and you're landing in the wrong place, like you could just blow out your whole year just
Mhm.
with one injury. So
Yeah.
how are you managing that risk?
I think for me, like, again, like, I've just been doing it for so long, I kind of know where that level's at. But I'd say it's probably relevant to other people, just at maybe a higher speed. Yeah, I start slow. I want to know what I'm running over for sure, so I don't get surprised or land on something off of a blind jump that I didn't know was there. You know, I always have my like rule of thumb where I never roll over anything that I can't see the backside of first lap, especially on a trail that I don't know, because you never know what is going to be on the backside. I at least want to like check it out for a lap first. So yeah, kind of get a lay of the land and then start building pace. And yeah, I feel like when I'm practicing and I'm pushing, I'm pushing, but I'm pushing like to the edge of kind of where my abilities are. You know, I'm not just like, all right, it's time to push this lap. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm just going to send it and hope for the best. It's like, I definitely don't ride like that. Like, I'm like, no, I need to clean up the exit of this corner a little bit. I could carry a little bit more speed here. I got to make sure I set up a little wider coming to this corner so I don't square the turn off as much, and I can carry more momentum. Like, I'm working on the little details. I'm not just kind of going from 50% to 100%, like I'm riding it, probably 90 whatever percent, but it's like I'm comfortable to maintain that pace pretty much lap after lap after lap. Like something's really going to have to like go wrong for me to have a big crash in practice, like at a bike park. Like that almost never happens, like I just, but again, I'm somebody when I practice, I practice pretty smart. I don't want to have that big crash and derail the progress. So I'll definitely go, a few seconds a lap slower when I'm out riding the bike park than I would, if I was racing or something, because it's just, I don't want to do race laps on the limit like that every single lap, or maybe I'll do one or a couple where I'm pushing like a certain pace, but I'm not pedaling in between sections so that I'm a little fresher. Like, for me to do an all out race lap, like a real true race run, I've usually, depending on the track, sometimes the local tracks like in SoCal, there's not a lot of pedaling. You can do a lot of really fast laps. But if I'm at 10 ply, like if I'm going to sprint and do like a proper race lap, I've pretty much got one of those in me a day. Like I'm not going to do multiple of those. Like it's a big effort. So I'll just back it down just a little bit to where I feel like I can be riding really fast and working on things, but at 90% instead of 100% or whatever. I'll just try to be smart and manage the laps. But as you're learning and building skills, you are trying things for the first time more often. So I think breaking the track into like smaller chunks, like into sections, even if you've got to stop before it, look at it, figure it out, then do it and kind of do that a few times before you try it in a full lap, like I think that can be helpful. So you can really focus on some sections and get them down kind of one at a time if you need to, like the more technical bits. But yeah, I think just managing the risk, like, kind of being smart about it. Like I want to be pretty sure I'm going to be able to pull something off before I try it. I'm not definitely trying lines or things where I'm like 50-50, I'm going to make it. Like that's not good enough odds for me. I need to be like 99% sure that it's going to work out, or at least I'll be able to case it and roll out of it and not crash or something.
Yeah. If you want the best cycling gear and bags in the game, Mission Workshop is it. Military spec construction, made in the USA, and the branding is super clean and understated. No loud logos, no hype. Just really well-made stuff that speaks for itself. Think high-end backpacks, enduro packs, technical apparel built to last. These are the people who make gear for people who actually ride. Link in the description. Use code UNPAVED to save 10%. And honestly, if you're gonna buy this stuff anyways, using that code is one of the easiest ways to help support what I'm doing here. I truly appreciate it. Okay, yeah. Yeah, I noticed too, like just breaking it in sections, like you said, I've been ticking off the different features on, whatever I'm working on and, the sections. And usually bike parks have each section. You don't have to go all the way through. So you can just work on that one and just keep building up the confidence. And you might be riding at 90, but someone that's, just started racing, or maybe they've been racing for a while, they might go from, what their normal, which maybe is like 30%, they're just chilling, to maybe they're 70%. So it really depends on who you are and where you're at, fitness and all those things, right? So
yeah, just build a little bit at a time, I would say, like
yeah,
little faster, little faster, little faster, and you'll kind of find where that edge of your comfortable abilities are,
yeah.
instead of just kind of like just trying to go nuts and hoping it works out.
Okay. So going on to bike fit and setup, I noticed, I've spent probably now about a month really dialing in. I have a Santa Cruz V10 and there's so many adjustment settings. And I know a lot of these downhill bikes today, like you're on the frameworks, have a lot of adjustments that you can do. Are you setting and forgetting, or are you constantly tweaking? For example, this weekend, I just moved the bars like a few millimeters back, swept towards me, made a huge difference. And it was like I don't know if it was the weight distribution of where I was, but it changed everything. Are you getting that right? And then you're leaving it for the season, or are you changing it depending on the track and like, because there's a lot there now, especially with the technology and bikes.
Yeah, I would say like cockpit setup, so bars, levers, stem length for the most part. I kind of know what works there, especially on bar roll and stuff, and I'm just super sensitive to that stuff. So if I roll it a little further forward or a little further back, then kind of my sweet spot, I just don't like it straight away. So that really hasn't changed forever. I don't constantly tweak with that, but it's because I found it. I think at the beginning you do need to tweak because you're just getting on a downhill bike for the first time. You're learning what works. You're trying different things, body positioning on a downhill bike versus a cross country bike. Like there's variables and all of that. So I think like absolutely like play with it until you find your sweet spot. For me personally, I know where that is, so I don't mess with that. I'm usually tuning more stuff like suspension. It depends on the bike. Ideally, you kind of set and forget your whole bike. You just, it's a really good bike. It does everything well. We do our preseason testing. You get through the first couple of races, whatever, you find a really good base setting, and you're just like, you're adding a little more air, a couple clicks here or there in your suspension, track to track, kind of, a little, maybe a PSI or two of tire pressure, depending on the track. Like those things are changing a little bit, but for the most part, the bike is the same all year. Like that's ideally where you want to get to. But sometimes you're working through a bike that has some bigger weaknesses. You're kind of constantly trying to figure out how to make them better. You're doing more testing. I've had years where I'm testing all the time, all year long, trying to figure things out. And I've had years like this year where I feel like my base setting on my bike is awesome. I'm really comfortable on it straight away. It's a winning setup. Ace and I are very similar in how we kind of set a bike up. He had his settings from last year. Nico has done a ton of testing on the Frameworks bike. So what they gave me was very close to what worked for me. We did some early preseason testing. I made a couple of tweaks, and for the most part, I've kind of found my base setting. I don't mess with it much. Like it just feels good. So ideally, I try to get there because then you can just focus on the riding and the bike's good. But not all bikes kind of get there, and until you have that level of experience and that level of support as well with my team, that makes it a lot easier. Like a lot easier. I got a lot of smart people around me that can help get me there a lot quicker, where I don't have to figure everything out 100% on my own. But I think at the beginning, like it is good to experiment with things. I think that's how you learn as well. Like, oh, I'll try closing my rebound, try opening my rebound. Like, what is the, try to feel what different things do. If you run less tire pressure, more tire pressure, roll your bars forward, roll them back, move your brake levers up, down, whatever. There's a lot of things you can do to kind of find that comfort and learn your preferences. Ultimately, I think that's all, great and a learning experience. But I think there is a point where you kind of got what you got. And I think some people can tinker to death on the bikes. And sometimes you just like, all right, dude, it's time to race. You just need to go race what you got,
Yeah.
make the most of it. So yeah, it's a tricky one for sure. But yeah, everybody's kind of got to go through that process. You don't really get to skip it. I've definitely paid my dues, and I've got a great team that makes it easier on me now. But I've tested through all of those things at length at some point in my career, usually multiple times.
You've mentioned before that there's been bikes that were a little weird or didn't fit you perfectly. You seem very comfortable, and like this new Frameworks is like really dialed for you. I know a lot of riders will go like a size up on their bike. I decided to stick with a large and just push everything out. And
Mhm.
I feel like that's kind of a sweet spot because I looked at an XL on 6'2", so I'm right on the edge there. I know you're smaller. Have you thought about going to a bigger bike, or are you on a bigger bike? Because the track depends, right? Like depending on where you're going to ride.
Yeah, I think as the tracks have, you know, evolved, I think they've obviously evolved a ton in the last 15, 20 years since I started racing. They've kind of, everything's gotten bigger over time from when I started. Like the frame sizes got bigger, the wheel sizes have gotten bigger, your bar length or width has gotten long. Like everything's just gotten bigger. The tracks I feel like are really fast. So yeah, I think with downhill, a lot of people like tend to, if you're going to lean towards a slightly bigger bike or a slightly smaller bike, a lot of people tend to lean a little bit towards a bigger bike because it's just a little bit more stable at speed. So the more you push it, kind of, it's just going to be a little more stable than a small bike. But if you get to too big of a bike, the bike just becomes slow on the clock. Like it's slow in and out of corners. It's harder to accelerate. It's hard to like maneuver. So you can definitely go too big where it's just becoming too big of a bike, especially on the US tracks. The tracks here are slower and flatter and tighter than the World Cup tracks that we race, where you really need a lot of stability out of the bike. So I almost feel like racing nationals here in the States versus racing World Cups, like I could almost ride a smaller bike at the nationals here than I race at the World Cups, because it's just they're not as big and gnarly of mountains and tracks that we're racing. So I think you kind of just got to figure out, first, like, what do you enjoy to ride? I think that's important. What's fun to ride for you? Because I think that goes a long ways. What feels comfortable and natural? Some people definitely migrate towards smaller bikes, and some people migrate towards bigger bikes and everything in between. There's so many things you can do to tweak it. Like you said, you can ride a smaller frame and you can stretch it out. Like you can add a reach adjust headset and, and usually get 5 to 10 mils longer in your reach. You can run a 50 mil stem, 45 or a 40 mil stem. So you've got some room to mess with reach there. There's different things you can do to kind of like customize the bike for yourself. So I think being somewhere like kind of in the middle, I think usually if you go super small or super big, or just super one direction on anything setup wise, you kind of back yourself into a corner. So I'm a big believer in trying to find a setup that's usually pretty neutral, and then I can tweak it a little bit more here or there depending on kind of what I want. But it's going to be more of a well-rounded setup that's good at everything, and not like, oh, this bike's really good in a straight line, but it's like really hard to turn, or it turns amazing, but it's super unstable, at speed.
Yeah.
I usually try to run a setup that's kind of right down the middle.
And that's what I've been experimenting with too. And I think a lot of people, I feel like a lot of people that I talk to, they just buy a bike and they don't change anything. They're like, they
Yeah,
just get used to it and adapt. And
for
I
sure.
noticed just even changing the wheelbase setting, I'm going to do a video on this soon, is that just going from the outer position to the middle position, and we're talking like less than a half, like a quarter inch.
Yeah, it's usually 5 millimeters.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
made a huge difference. I was under steering a lot in corners when it
Mhm.
was in but depending on the place that you go, if it's flatter and it's more technical turns, that smaller wheelbase helped dramatically compared
Yeah,
to pushing everything out. So, yeah,
totally.
and it's experimentation, right? It's going to take time to do that. It sounds like you've put so much time into it. You've really fine-tuned it, but you also know what something's going to do and you can adapt to that. So,
Totally. Yeah, you learn over the years for sure. And a lot of times if you change one thing, it's kind of affecting something different as well. So like if you were to, for example, take your rear end chip on your rear axle and you lengthen it out, 5 or 10 millimeters, you flip the chip the other way and you make it longer, you're going to now have more weight on the front tire in the front, and the front end for me is naturally going to feel a little bit lower in the front as well. So a lot of times if I go longer on the rear, now I've got more weight on the front. Your suspension bias as far as where your weight is going to be a little different too. You're going to have a little more weight on your forks. So it's like sometimes you can pull the front end up just slightly or stiffen it up a little bit, or whatever. Because even if you lengthen the rear end a little bit with the wheelbase, now you're changing the leverage ratio on your shock as well. So the bike's going to feel like it's riding a little softer, a little stiffer. It's like, so everything kind of affects something else. So that's kind of where like experimenting a little bit, and different riders have different levels of feel and pickiness, let's call it. But yeah, I'm always like, my job is to find every 10th on the track and to make sure I'm working with the people and that I understand a lot of these things to a certain extent, and we're looking for every little bit of an advantage. But for so many people, it's like, as long as your tires aren't flat and the suspension's somewhat working, like they just get on the bike and ride, like it's fine. So but I do think it's fun if you have the time, and especially if you're trying to race, and find some time to have the time to dig into some of those details and learn it a bit.
it's important, I think, to, know your kit, if you're trying to race and take it serious. I think the big takeaway that you said is that when you affect one thing, it affects another thing. And I didn't really think about that when I changed the wheelbase. I wasn't thinking, now, how does the fork feel? So that's a good takeaway. And I'm going to really think about that more if I'm making some adjustments to the bike. So now, tire pressures. So this is like, some people are like secretive about this to where I'm like, I don't know. maybe that makes sense. But, and then the other thing I noticed is like I can set my tire pressures for a high speed jump line. And then I can set my tire pressures for 10 ply or some really technical downhill. So what are you doing to kind of manage that and find the balance, and roughly where are you at? Because I think a lot of people would kind of want to know like where to start, you know?
Yeah, I think again, everybody's different. I think your speed, your weight, I think a lot of those things kind of will change what your tire pressure is. Like, for me, my pressures aren't going to work for somebody probably that weighs 150 pounds and is slower than I am. Like, or, maybe they did, like, everybody is different in their preferences as well. I've generally historically run a bit more pressure than most people because I don't like my tires folding and like squirming around. And I really don't like hitting my rims, because when you hit your rims on rocks, that's a lot of times when you flat or you break wheels. And if you're breaking wheels in your race runs, you're obviously not getting first place. So for me, like, making sure the bike can get down the hill is more important than like every last ounce of comfort. If I'm running a setup where I'm like, man, it feels a little bit better, but I'm probably going to get a flat or two every year. It's like, well, you can't do that when you're racing for championship points. I'm not willing to risk it. So I'll run a little bit more pressure just to not have mechanicals as much. So I run a little on the higher side, but those numbers have come down over the years. It always also depends on what tires you're running. Every tire manufacturer is different. Their sidewall stiffnesses and rubber compounds are different. So some tires, notoriously, you have to run more pressure, some less. Now they have radial tires and all these other different things. So you're being able to get away with different pressures. So like, for example, historically on the old Maxxis tires or Onza tires, or even, early on E13 tires, whatever, like, I was pretty much always at like 28 PSI in the front, 32 in the rear, definitely on the stiffer side. I won most of my races on those tire pressures. Tires have gotten a lot better in the last 5 to 10 years. The casings are getting better. They're stiffer, but also kind of more compliant at the same time, which is kind of crazy. But basically, they're just increasing, like, the product is getting better to a level where the tires are more durable and coming down, because you're able to still have that stability that you need, and not be getting flats and stuff like that. So now we run Continental tires. I really love the casing and kind of the whole setup of those tires. I'm able to run a little bit less pressure on these tires than I've ever run on other tires, by like a PSI or two compared to the last couple of years. So my kind of go-to starting pressures right now are 25 in the front and 29 in the rear. And I will go up or down depending on track conditions, usually up. But if, say, we raced at Mountain Creek, was my last race a month ago, I think, and it rained and it was like real slippery and just kind of hard pack and different things. So I think I went down to like 24, 28. I went down a pound, 1 PSI front and rear, to just try to get the tire a little softer, because it slowed the track down as well, where you weren't hitting stuff as hard. So I didn't have to worry about hitting my rims. But a lot of times at the World Cup tracks, have a really fast, rough track and, big, gnarly square edge rocks and all that kind of stuff, then I might go up a PSI, or maybe even two. Maybe I even end up at, 26, 31 or something, which would be pretty high, but I've done it. Or a track like Windrock, we have some big square edges, but you've got a ton of support in the corners. Like, we've got these like pretty steep berms where you can push really hard everywhere. And so, like you said, it rides more maybe like a jump track, where like you have so much support, you can push so hard, that for me, I'm like, okay, cool, I can run more pressure, because I don't want the tire folding around. I just want the thing, grip is less important on a turn that has tons of support compared to like an off camber corner with roots and stuff. So I can get away with a bit more pressure there than I would at some of the other tracks that are a little more slippery. So yeah, 25, 29 is kind of my base, and sometimes I wander a PSI or two up or down depending on the course.
Okay. So it's very subtle adjustments. You're not doing major, like you're not doing like 3 or 4 PSI. Like if you're going track to track, play around with, once you find your baseline, maybe going up a little bit and not going crazy either way.
Yeah, and again, like I just have kind of found that base setting, let's call it, with my tire pressures after so many years. So I'm just, I'm just barely fine tuning a little bit here and there. I'm never making, PSI jumps more than two. Two would even be a ton. If I got to two on a race weekend, it was because I did one first and then wanted one more. But so I'm always like just slightly tweaking. But again, I know the feel, I know the pros and cons on every track, every condition over so many years of racing. So I know I'm just never going to go down five or up five or whatever, because I'm just kind of where I am. If I go up or down that much, like there's too many negatives that started to come into play, but I've just learned that over the years. So yeah, small tweaks for me for sure.
Yeah, and I noticed too that you set your pressures for the day, you ride, and by the end of the day, things have changed, and you got to go and check your pressures again and get those. Is that what you're doing? You're constantly checking your pressure throughout your day of practicing, or especially before a race run.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's a lot of variables. I mean, if I'm just out riding for the day and just having fun and doing jump laps, like, dude, I'm notorious for like checking the pressure with my hand and not even grabbing a gauge half the time,
Most
because
of us.
I don't care. Like, I'm riding jump laps, but if I'm there to go fast for the weekend, and then usually anytime I'm racing, I always have my mechanic. So I'm fortunate I have a full-time mechanic that works for me year round. So it's very rare that I'm riding a downhill bike and he's not there with me. So he's checking pressures like every lap. Like, we have our routines. I mean, you have a bike at the bottom of the hill in the pits where it's cold, and then you roll it out in the sun and then go up the ski lift, and sometimes your tire pressure will change a pound or two. If you put your bike out in the sun outside of the pit for 10 minutes, the pressures are going to go up a few pounds. Same thing with suspension pressure, like when you check your pressures. So we just try to do it consistent regardless of where we're at. So if we've been checking, pressures, I try to just check it, to keep it right at. I don't try to play the game like, oh, if it's 28 in the pits, but it's 30 at the top, then I'm gonna, like, I just try to make it where I want it to be and just leave it there. But yeah, there are a lot of variables. Like, it's constantly migrating. But yeah, we are always checking pressure, usually 10 minutes before I roll in for my race run at the top of the hill. When my mechanic's with me, we do that last pressure check to make sure everything's where we need it to be.
Okay, that's good to know. Yeah, and if you obviously can't do that at the top and you're about to race, at least check it before you get on the lift, right? So
Yeah, exactly. Just do it before you leave the pit. And it'll be consistent, because if you're checking pressures in the pits all weekend and you do it before your race run, then it's going to be basically the same. If it's fluctuating at all as you go up, then it's going to fluctuate probably the same amount. I'll be a little careful sometimes, like if I'm at the top of the hill for 30 minutes warming up and I know the bike's been in the shade a long time, I probably won't let it sit out in the direct sun, because I know the suspension pressures, the tire pressures, everything's are going to come up a little bit. So I'll try to put my bike under a tree or something, so it's not like getting way too hot, or vice versa. If it's super cold outside, maybe I will try to set it in the sun, because if it's 45 degrees and the wind's blowing, your tires, your suspension pressure, everything breaks a little different. So you want there to be a little bit of heat in the bike. So, but I mean, we're talking little details, right?
yeah, but that's great to know, if that someone can just take that away and like they don't have to spend years and years figuring that out. They at least have an idea or understanding like what that's going to do in those sort of conditions, especially when it's really, really hot, right? So that's going to change things too. So we are both running 5 Dev cranks. Great company. They make great stuff. When I was talking to them, they were talking about experimenting with adding weight in the bottom bracket to like the spindle, I believe. Are
Yep.
you adding weight? Because I'm starting to see this a lot now in downhill bikes, where I have a Santa Cruz Bullet, and that's sort of my e-bike that I train with, and that thing weighs about 50 pounds. And in some ways, I like it better because it's so stable and planted. And then
Mm-hmm.
you move over to the downhill bike, and my downhill bike weighs 36 and a half pounds. So it's less. So are you guys adding weight? And a lot of people have been wondering this, like what's going on with that? Is the tech moving in that direction that you would start putting weight down low for more stability to kind of make it ride a little bit more smooth? Or is that, trade-offs, right? So
Yeah. Again, I think it's a little bit rider dependent and also a little bit track dependent. Like, if you have a track that's pretty flat and pedally and not super rough, then having more stability with the weight, I don't think is as advantageous as having a bike that's a little lighter. You can maneuver it, you can accelerate it a little bit easier as far as pedaling, stuff like that. But yeah, if you got a fast track, it's really fast, really rough. You can carry a lot of momentum. I've tested it, and if you do run a little bit of weight around the bottom bracket, it does kind of mellow the bike out. I've found that it makes it mostly where the advantage that I feel is on entry to corners when it's really rough. So if you're coming into a turn going really fast and you got braking bumps and the bike's dancing around before it plants into the corner, it settles the bike so it's easier to kind of hold a line and be braking smooth through the rough where the bike's not kicking around as much. So it makes it easier to kind of like get your entry angle into corners a little bit more consistent because bike's not moving around as much. Like it's just tracking, and then you hit your corner kind of right in the sweet spot. So it does settle that down a bit. So yeah, with 5Dev, they actually made us some, I think I'm allowed to talk about this. They made us some like custom axles or spindles for the bottom bracket. And I think
It was a
mine,
Sea Otter, just so you know. So I
yeah,
think it's
yeah,
pretty public. Yeah,
yeah, should
yeah.
be good. I know Ace has been running it since last year a little bit, but yeah, I think ours add a pound to the bottom bracket. I believe it's a pound or a pound and a half. I think it's a pound. I think they have different ones, but I think I'm running a pound. So yeah, just a little bit. Obviously, it depends on the bike. Our bike's pretty light as well, like the Santa Cruz. So we've got a little bit of room to play with as well. I know some of the really light riders like Jackson, has added like 2 to 3 pounds. If you add a little bit more weight to the bike, it's harder to accelerate the bike. But once you get it up to speed, the roll speed, if you've ever ridden down like say a dirt road with a buddy, if the dirt road is slightly downhill and you're riding right next to each other, the heavier guy is going to roll away from the lighter guy. Like you've just got a little bit more weight. So the bike, once it gets up to speed, will actually carry that momentum a little bit better. So it does help in those kind of flatter, longer sections, as far as carrying speed and stuff like that goes, as long as it's not like you're just smashing on the pedals and, then it can be a little bit of a deterrence, I think. But yeah, I think overall, like it's worth playing with. If you want to find a really easy way to test it, the first time I tested it, shout out to Jason Schroeder at Vital MTB. He had some weighted ankle straps, like the workout
I
straps
saw that. Yeah.
that people weigh, and you can buy them on Amazon, I think, for 15 or 20 bucks. And I think they even come with like 1 pound and 2 pound or something. They're pretty cheap. They're like neoprene. So
Yep.
you can like wrap those around the bottom of your down tube. It won't scratch your frame. There's a Velcro. It takes you 2 seconds to put them on and take them off. So if you wanted to just try what does the weight feel like, testing, that's one of the easiest ways to do it because you can just like strap it on for a couple of laps and then just take it off for a couple of laps and then try 1 pound and try 2 pound. And it's just very easy to like get those things off and on the bike so you can do comparison runs. And then yeah, if you end up liking it, then you can get a spindle or whatever. But yep.
Cool.
So yeah, for us, and I think a lot of World Cup riders are all running a little bit of weight in their bottom bracket, which is funny because for so long we were trying to make the bikes as light as we could because they were just big tanks. And now that they've gotten light, I think adding the weight in that area can be beneficial in certain situations. I wouldn't add that weight probably to, maybe another area of my bike, but in that spot, it's pretty good.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, I think a lot of people have been kind of curious about that. You see it on social and things like that. And when I was at Sea Otter and they were showing the spindle, and I was like, oh, okay, and it makes sense, especially if you're used to riding an e-bike. You'll notice it right away. It takes a little while to get used to, I think, jumping on an e-bike from a really light trail bike, but once you get used to it, it's awesome. You can just
Yep.
like crush over features that you wouldn't think you would, and the bike is way more composed, I noticed.
Yep. Yep,
Yeah.
for sure.
So let's now talk about, and this was a big factor this weekend, jumping, scrubbing, like the technique you need for racing. A lot of races have jumps, and a lot of places are windy. So what are you doing to manage safely? For example, Friday was super windy. Almost nobody was hitting anything. But there's times where you're racing. I mean, I even know from your hardline race they, it was too windy. They had to shut
Yeah.
it down. So that doesn't really happen usually with World Cup races and things like that, right? So what are you doing? And also, I know there's different types of techniques with like scrubbing jumps, and some are for people that are really talented and really good at, and then there's, what do they say? Scrub for show or scrub for dough. So if
Yeah.
you could talk a little bit about that and like the proper technique and the wind and jumping and that when it comes to racing.
You're trying to stay lower so that you don't overshoot the jump going really fast. So really, like when you're scrubbing, all you're trying to do is slow down less. So you're trying to scrub speed when in reality you're trying to more scrub height. You can stay lower. So if you're going lower, you can be going faster. If you hit a jump going the same speed in theory and you pull up, you're going to go, 15 feet past the landing. If you push down and scrub, you could case the jump, and if you just kind of dead sailor off of it, you land right in the sweet spot. So like trying to break it down really simple, like there's kind of three ways to hit a jump. Like you can pull up because you're trying to get more height and more distance, or you can just kind of hit it at trail speed and you know you're just going to give exactly what the lip gives you, or you're going to push down and scrub. So you're trying to get the wheels on the ground sooner. So basically what that means is if you come to a jump faster than what you can land on the landing, then you can scrub speed or scrub height by scrubbing, like pushing down off the lip to where you can hit the jump at that speed and not over jump the thing. So yeah, I think in racing situations, you're trying to go as fast as possible. So if there's a jump where the option is either slow down or scrub it, you're going to try to scrub it so you don't have to slow down. I think more or less, to say it in its most simple form, and you got to be careful on this because you can definitely do a front flip if you do it wrong. But in general, the easiest way to kind of think about that, I think, is if you're standing really tall on the bike, so you're standing kind of upright, as you get to the lip, as they say, this is the top of the lip here, like this. It's like as you get to this point, right at like say the knuckle of the lip, as you're standing tall, you can kind of squat down as the bike leaves the ground. So you're kind of pushing the bike a little bit lower. Whereas when you pull up off the top, you're making the bike go higher. Here, you're like pushing down. So as you go off, you're scrubbing that speed. You start to lay the bike over, and you can do that a little earlier, which is why you then kind of go sideways. But you can kind of stay lower on a jump without even really turning the bars. You can kind of just like get lower. But if you mistime it, you're going to end up in a huge endo. So, and you can't do that on a jump that's, a 10 feet tall lip compared to a lip that's 3 feet tall. Like there's a lot of different variables that come into trying to scrub. But yeah, obviously the lower you can stay on the jumps, the faster you can go. So that's the goal. I'm sure there's YouTube videos explaining it. I've never really known how to explain that. It's just been a feel thing. I've done it for so long since I raced dirt bikes. So I've never tried to do a YouTube video on it because I don't know that I can explain it really well. I can just kind of show somebody. And I think it is something that naturally happens as you get faster. If you try to scrub a jump and you're not going fast enough and you don't have the right speed, like you're just going to crash or case the jump, or like you've really got to be in a point of needing to scrub and kind of having the skills. Like you start doing like little small ones, like you probably notice, like as you start hitting jumps a little too fast, you're like, oh, I can kind of like suck it up a little bit with my body. It's like, cool. Well, that's like stage one of a scrub. You're not going
Yeah.
to go from straight airing something to like drifting off the lip and just pitching the bike over because you watched a YouTube video. I think it's something that naturally comes out of necessity as you get faster and as you get more comfortable. Like if you were just to go up a jump and just turn the wheels sideways to do a scrub, like you're just going to shoot off the side of the jump if you're not used to what that technique feels like. So yeah, I think it's something that comes with time, and I think it's just important to like slowly work yourself into it, to get the feel of it. Especially Snow Summit has some great jumps where the jumps are like really tall but they're really short. So those are kind of easy ones where you can kind of like practice like pushing down off a lip and kind of turning a little bit where the gap is small, so you're not trying to scrub like a 30-foot jump with high consequences. um, so yeah, I think that's always good. When it comes to the wind and scrubbing, you kind of have to scrub or at least like whip into the wind if it gets really windy. So like, for example, if you're coming at a jump and the wind is right to left, if you straight air the jump, the bike is just going to fade that way, right? If you are able to whip the bike out into the wind, so say the wind's coming from this way, you go off the lip and you whip into this, you're pushing in and then the wind is pushing back into you and then straightening you up, right? So that you're trying to always scrub into the wind and then it's pushing back on you. If you were to hit a jump where the wind is right to left and you scrub this way and the wind's going this way, that thing's just going to keep going. And now we're in a really bad situation, right? Like the thing's just going to blow fully out sideways on you and you're going to land 90 degrees and have a hugie. So it's important to know which way the wind is coming, because if you guess it wrong, the wind will make it way worse really quickly. So yeah, hardline was kind of scary because it was really windy. It were really big jumps. Usually jumps are small enough if you kind of stay low that it doesn't really affect you as much. But on these jumps that are 100 feet long, you're in the air a long time. So they had wind socks on the lips and you're kind of trying to spot them as you're coming in, which was a little sketchy. But if you saw that thing was blowing hard right to left and you were still going to try to jump the jump, you're always trying to whip the bike into the wind. And then so you're pushing it into the wind and the wind's kind of pushing back and then straightening you out for landing. So yeah, that's fairly advanced. And on those size of jumps, not the funnest thing to have to kind of figure out because it's pretty scary because the wind's not always consistent. It's usually gusty, and you don't have a lot of time to set up for it. But in general, yeah, if you're going to try to scrub the bike or whip the bike, you always want to whip into the direction the wind is coming from, not the direction it's going. And that's kind of what straightens you out.
And it'd be good to know as you're going down the race course which jumps are facing which way, because as you go down the race course, the wind direction isn't changing, but the direction of where it is. So you kind of have to feel that out. So I'm guessing you kind of figure that out in practice runs, and then you kind of have an idea, and then that's in your head when you're attacking that, feature jump, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And in general, like if it's windy, if you're not able to scrub, I would say the next best thing or equal as good of a technique, and it's a little scary, but if you can hit a jump going faster and kind of push down and stay lower, the bike's going to be less affected by the wind. Whereas if you're going at a jump and the only way you're going to make it is to like pop it and like jump really high, now you're just like literally sitting up there in the wind. Whereas if you can keep the momentum going more straight and lower to the ground, you're going to be less affected by the wind than if you like pull up and go really high. Then, like I said, you're just up there with not a lot of speed. So you're going to be blown around pretty easy.
I learned that lesson, and this is why I wanted to ask you this, is because a few weeks ago, I literally went 3 feet over on the jump because of the manual and down the back face, the bad technique I had. So that was like a big wake up call. It was like God telling me, hey, you need to work on this skill. And so, yeah, wind, very important. So, so are you ever training on flats? Do you?
Yeah.
I know you do. Okay. All right.
Sometimes.
I know you have a great video on clips. I recently just started to try clips. And in some ways I love them, but then I also notice that I feel way more comfortable on flats. And I think, you look at the downhill park, most people I find that are not racing are on flats. So maybe give me a little bit of insight on that.
Yeah, I think both are good. I think for racing purposes, past a certain level and assuming that you're comfortable enough to where they're not going to be like a hazard, I like clips for racing because they just keep your foot in the perfect position on the pedal. It's really hard for me when I get to big, gnarly, rough World Cup tracks with how fast you're going, how rough the tracks are, to keep your feet planted on the pedals. And if your feet are bouncing around and you're having to readjust and you're running stuff, it's just like, for me, I'm losing time. It's messing me up. There have been a couple of World Cup riders that have been able to do it in the past, like Sam Hill or even like Connor Fearon more recently. But again, you're going to have a hard time making that argument in modern day riding that flats are going to be better at that level than clips. Like with clips, you're locked into your bike. To me, there's really no disadvantages to riding clips. unless potentially, it's so loose that you're wanting to put your foot out occasionally to have a little, like if it's really muddy and rooty and off cambery or something, and you can just be a little more aggressive because you can kind of dab a foot if you need to. But when you get really good at riding clips, you can still dab your foot. Like I can start to crash and unclip and dab my foot before I actually crash. Like I take my foot off almost as easy as I would with a flat pedal. Because you're just used to clipping in and out so much, like it just becomes second nature. But at first, when you lock into pedals, when you're first running clips, it's scary. Like, and if you're gonna crash, you're crashing. Like first year I raced downhill, I raced flats. I think the whole year, the second season, I started running clips at like the drier tracks where I felt more confident. And if it was wet and muddy and slippery, I would run flats because I was too sketched out being locked into clip pedals. But yeah, I think overall clips are great because you can be really aggressive and your feet stay in the right spot on the pedals. When you're trying to pedal through rock gardens and stuff like that too, like I think your feet just aren't bouncing around. So I think you're a little more efficient pedaling as well. But I do think you can really train some bad habits by running clips too early. For example, when you go to jump a jump, instead of having good technique and figuring out how to jump, and how a bike floats and all that stuff, you can start to pull up with your feet to jump or to bunny hop. And that can really get you into some big problems as you start hitting bigger jumps. It's not the correct way to jump. So yeah, I think some riders that go to clips really fast when they're learning a lot of those foundational techniques can develop some bad habits. So even for me, I like running flats. I think they're fun to ride. And, I run clips 99% of the time. So even for myself, I can develop some bad habits where I start to kind of rely on my clips a little bit more than I probably should be. So I'll go back to flats, usually on my e-bike, not on the downhill bike too much. When I'm just riding trails at home or riding fun tracks, and I'll run flats for a month or something just for fun. And I'm always surprised by how hard it is for me to keep my feet on the pedals when I first start riding them, because I'm just not used to kind of diving my heels a little bit under braking and kind of riding with a little bit of better technique. So yeah, I think it's fun for me, and it does kind of reinforce some better habits sometimes for how much I run clips. But so I think both are good. I think as you're learning, for sure, I think flats are pretty good, like I said. But I think if you're really wanting to race and find time, you might have to be selective with the tracks you feel comfortable doing it on at first. But I think if you can get comfortable on clips, I think they are a little bit better.
Okay. Yeah. I'm to the point now with my skill set that I thought it would be good to move into clipping in. I'm pretty comfortable on flats. My problem is I have a big foot, and there's not very many flats that will fit your foot perfectly in the spot that you want. So I'm still trying to find a flat where, when you get in, you're in, but during a run and you slip off, it's very hard to get in that perfect position again if your foot doesn't fit the pedal. So yeah.
And that takes some experimenting. There's a lot of things you can do with your clip pedal setup that will make it easier or harder to clip in and clip out, because that's probably the most common issue when you first start running clips is like, I can clip into them in the parking lot or in the start gate when everything's perfect. But if I come out on the trail and I'm bouncing around, I'm like, good luck getting back in. Like, you just haven't developed the feel, or a lot of times the setup is just where it's really hard to get back into the clip. So for me, every shoe is different as well. So there's not like a perfect way to do it because every pedal is different. But the things you can play with is you can put a plate underneath your cleat, and that will raise the height of the cleat itself, which will make it usually a little easier to find and get into. It also can make it too easy to get out sometimes, like it makes it a little swirly. So it depends on, but that is one thing you can do. You can also experiment with different size pedal pens, or you can take your pens out of your pedals, and that will also make it a lot easier to get back in, because as you're trying to move your foot around on the pedal, it's not hooking on those pins and catching the ridges of your shoe, so you can kind of search around a little easier. For me, I don't really like doing that, because as I get used to it, my problem is coming out of the clip when I don't want to. Like, I want that thing to be pretty stiff, and I'm pretty good at finding it So I usually run pins, and I run like the one little, I don't even know if I run a plastic plate. I don't think I do. I think I put it straight on, but I run 510 shoes, and HT pedals. So every brand is different. The Crank Brothers pedals, they're kind of cool with their contraption because you can kind of slide back into the clip. You don't have to just go forward. For me, I don't have the stability in the Crank Brothers pedals. Like, I come out of those way too easy. Like when I turn, like my feet twist and I blow out of my shoes. So like for me, I've run those HT. They were the X2s and the X3s, like those same clip pedals for like, I don't even know, probably 10 plus years now. Like, they just have a really solid snap. I don't come out of them unless I want to come out. They're easy to find, easy to clip out. Like, they just have a really good feel for me. Those have kind of been my sweet spot. But everybody's different, and you can mess around with the setup a lot to make it easier. You can also adjust the tension of your spring to make it easier to clip in and clip out, or harder. So yeah, it does take some fine tuning. And as you said, with a bigger foot too, the one thing that most companies have gotten better at is the slots in the bottom of the shoes where your cleat actually sits. A lot of times when you ride flats, you're kind of riding more towards the middle of your foot, which you do want to be a little slightly forward the middle. Like, I don't think like all the way, like, you know, all that to say that most clip pedals, I run my cleats as far back as I can get them, like, because that's more in the sweet spot of where I want to be. Earlier, when I first started riding clips, I think most clip shoes were set up like cross country shoes. So the cleats were really far forward. So I'd actually take a steak knife and cut the slots of my shoes out so that I could get the cleat to go further back towards the middle of my foot, because I didn't want to be that much on my toes. So yeah, sometimes you can modify. I don't know if that voids the warranty or makes it sketchy, but it worked for me. But now, yeah, I basically just run my cleats as far back as I can get them on those 510 shoes, and they're in the right spot. But it definitely takes some experimenting. You'll figure it out in time.
Yeah, I found the shoe shields with the Crank Brothers, and I was running the mallets. That
Yep.
all worked pretty well. I was actually saying when I'm on flats that I
Oh
have
yeah.
a problem, because the platform of where all the spikes are, contacting your foot, you have to be in this perfect place. And if you're a little off here or a little over here, it just isn't the same. And it's hard to find that each time with flats,
Yep.
finding a set of flats that are big enough for my foot. But I
Yep.
definitely feel way more comfortable in flats. So I think this
Yep.
is good insight on both. It's interesting because I thought you were going to tell me that no, I don't mess with flats at all. But, you use both and you use them to train, and each has its benefit or not. So,
Yeah, I'd
yeah.
say it's rare, but I do still ride flats sometimes, just
Yeah.
for fun and technique. Yeah.
And thank you for hanging with me on this.
Oh
I
no,
know
all
this
good,
is
man.
longer, dude. But yeah,
No, good questions. Good info.
thanks. I spent some time trying to get the right questions to ask you that I think would help us, me and other fellow riders. So I know that a lot of people probably overthink this. Sometimes it can be dangerous. Sometimes it can make your whole month when you're looking at a feature and you finally check that feature off. So I know experience comes in hand here, but what kind of insight can you give when it comes to like progressing to the features either on a race course or at the bike park, that big gap jump or, this big drop? For example, you have this iconic Red Bull drop at your Tennessee National. And, that thing looks big on camera. I'm sure it looks pretty big. Like, what are you telling riders, racers? Like, what is that mindset? How do you know when to commit? And what should you look at, or what should you be thinking of before you do those things? So,
Yeah, I think when it comes to big features, like obviously progressing up to the feature, not taking like a massive jump from some, dropping off a curb to like a 50-foot drop. Try to like ride stuff that's going to kind of progress you up to that feature as much as you can. Obviously, that's not always available at every bike park. But yeah, I think trying to progress up to it is like step one. So it kind of does feel like a natural progression where you're comfortable on something that's like similar but a little bit smaller, and then just kind of go bigger and bigger. Every feature is different as far as like if you got to pull up or push down or whatever. I think with mountain bikes, one of the hardest parts of riding new bigger features is guessing the speed. I think that's where you can go wrong the easiest. Like there's the technique of jumping, but assuming you're able to go off of a jump and not endo or like loop out, and you can just guarantee that you're going to keep the bike flat, that's where you want to be first and foremost, comfortable enough to where when you go off a jump, you know you can land here. Because if you case a jump or you go a little bit long and you're here, you're fine. Whereas if you're here or you're here, like then you can get into some issues. So I would say like being able to like keep the bike flat in the air when you're jumping something for the first time, or usually it's a little nose heavy, because if you land off a drop where the landing's like this and you land flat, like you're kind of gonna slap down a little bit. So kind of just being able to maintain an arc on a jump where you're not going over the bars or looping out. Once you're comfortable with that, then I think the speed is the second thing. And for me, some people are different and they don't like following people. If I'm going to jump a really big feature for the first time, like say at Hardline earlier this year, I always followed somebody off of it the first time that had already jumped it and knew what the speed was. You obviously have to follow somebody you trust, because somebody can lead you to your death if they're not a good rider. But like for the most part, if you can find somebody super experienced and very comfortable on the jump, you can watch them jump it once or twice and you're like, oh yeah, they got this down good. And they can lead you off the jump in a safe way. Emphasis on safe, like where they're not coming at a certain speed and then all of a sudden last second they pull up really hard or they scrub really hard, and then you're like, dude, like now my speed is messed up. If they can kind of trail speed you, let's call it, off the jump.
So following somebody in at trail speed and them not doing anything crazy. And we're talking now like high speed jump line, like Whistler, A line, Dirt Merchant, that sort of thing is what I'm envisioning in my mind.
For sure.
But also like, where you're going down some super sketchy loose, with a drop, like, technical kind of things like that.
Yeah, I think if it's a big double or a big drop, a lot of times I'm, try to follow somebody the first time, because then you can kind of take that guessing the speed out of the equation, where you can follow somebody that's already done it. So you're not going to overshoot it or case it. Being comfortable, with the pitch of the bike in the air. And then I think the last thing is like when you decide to jump something big, like when you decide to go, like don't hesitate, like don't half do it. If you've decided you're going to do it. And I think that's where a lot of people run into problems, is they know how to jump, they know the technique, everything's fine. And then they like, all right, I'm going to do it. And then instead of just jumping like they normally know how to jump, they like freeze, or they do something weird, or they like get so tight that they come off the jump. It's like, if you're going to do it, I always tell people, like, if you're going to go. Like, if you're going to commit, you got to commit. Like, you just got to accept the consequences if you decide you're going to do it, and just go, okay, but I'm not going to crash because I'm going to like freak out. Like, I'm going to use the right technique. I'm going to be focused. I'm going to hit it like it's a jump I've hit before, and we're going to do it. You know what I mean? So that would be kind of the last thing, because I see so many people get sketchy on jumps or do weird stuff where I'm like, why? Like, you're totally good enough to be doing this, but you're just so afraid to like commit to doing it that now you're actually making something that should be fine for you pretty sketchy. So like, stop doing that. Like, if you're going to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think that's a true testament when you signed up for Hardline is,
yeah. 100%.
Some of those features you've never done that big features, right? Maybe on a moto, but I mean, those features were insane. And so that mental mindset of like going through that, and how quickly all you guys progressed, hitting every single one of those features. I was watching each day, and yeah, it was pretty cool to see that. And it seems like there's a lot of support there too, where you're all, yeah. So when do you commit? When do you back off?
I think for me, I'm always weighing the consequences, like the benefits and the consequences first and foremost, because usually for me, it's not a question of if I'm good enough to jump it. It's like, is the risk worth the reward? And I think everybody kind of does need to answer that question as well. Like, even I know 50-year-old dads that shred and they're like, but I got to go to work on Monday. Like, I'd like to jump it, but it's just risk isn't worth the reward for where they're at in their skills or whatever. So I think answering that question is a good starting point. I do the same thing, if we're somewhere and there's some massive jump or usually for me, it's not so much a big jump. It's like a sketchy jump in a rock garden or a line or something that you're like, okay, I would do this if it was a World Cup and we were really locked in, but it's a Thursday and I'm just trying to get some training laps in, and like, I don't need to do this 6 laps in a row. Like, it's a lot of risk. And I'm okay being like, I'm just not going to do it because it's, the benefit is not worth the risk in that situation. So I think that's worth considering. Being honest with where your skills are at, on both sides. If the skills aren't quite there and you're uncomfortable and it starts feeling like a 50-50, you're going to make it type of thing. And for me, I'm like, 50-50 is not a good enough odds. But if you're in a situation where you have the skills, do that. And then at some point it's like, okay, you have the skills, you want to do it. It's time to do it. Like, you got to step up and make it happen. And that is part of the fun and the scariness of riding mountain bikes, right? That everybody can relate to. So it's part of the game. But I think, that point is different for everybody. Some people are definitely more brave and some people are pretty skilled and less brave. So they probably take too long to do things, and everybody's kind of got to find that point,
Yeah. I look at the run out.
Yeah. That's another good question. Yeah. That's like the stuff I don't really think about, but that's a great point, because a lot of times there'll be a drop and the drop kind of is followed by a corner, and you're like, I'm good enough to hit the drop, but I don't know if I'm good enough to hit the drop and still make the corner. So it's like, you got to be able to land in a way that you're controlling the landing and getting on the brakes and slowing down. Because a lot of times, the crash happens after the jump, not on the jump. So fair point.
Yeah. And I've scared myself where I'm like, I'm prepared. I'm ready to do this. Like, I remember the first time I hit the flow drop at Mammoth, and I was like, I can do this. I'm good. I went off of it and I was like, that was a lot bigger than I thought it was.
Yeah.
It's just where my skill was at the time. And so, certain features can scare you more, and then it kind of puts a little bit more hesitation next time. So I guess, the sport is dangerous and you want to keep progressing, but that's a lot of good insight as far as, how to approach it. I think following someone in, looking at it. Do you do these things when you're alone? That's the other thing. A lot of time, this sport is us by ourselves doing what we do. And we don't always have a riding buddy, So I'm a lot more cautious. Like, I went to ride Bootleg Canyon for my first time, and somehow I made it down Reaper. Yeah. And it was a completely different experience doing it alone in a half shell than when I was with my buddies and they were showing me that place, So
yeah, for sure. I think the process is similar. It's just probably toned down a little bit. Like, you don't have somebody to follow. So again, that would be a great example of like, oh, my buddy's not here today, but he will be here next week. Maybe I'll just wait a week because I know he has this jump super dialed and I can follow him off of it. So, sometimes there's decisions like that, or maybe just delay it a little bit, maybe doing a couple run-ins, checking the speed, watching somebody else do it or not, but maybe what you're willing to do might be a little bit smaller. If you're kind of following a similar process, it's just maybe toned down a little bit. I know that when I'm by myself out riding, even Big Sky here next week when they open, I'm kind of cautiously scoping out all the trails and kind of looking at things. And if there's a really big jump, I got a World Cup coming up in a couple of weeks, or, I'm going to be just smart about why I'm there and what I'm trying to accomplish that day. And
because I think it is very interesting. Asa, I know you've been mentoring him, and he seems like such a nice kid. He seems like he's really in touch with his inner child, where he's just having fun when he rides. And it seems like he's just so relaxed on the bike because of that. So what are some of the things that you mentioned that you coach yourself? You have your rider camps that you do at Windrock and probably do some private coaching too. What are some of the things that you mentor riders? And, for example, like Asa, what are you guys working on?
Yeah. With Asa, I can't really take credit for anything that kid's been doing. if he has a mentor, it would be Nico or, other people, his parents and stuff probably. But yeah, we've only been teammates since January, but I think he's such a good rider. There's not a lot I'm going to tell him that's going to be like mind blowing. I think more of the stuff that I'm excited to just be around, if I can add little bits to, and what we have kind of chatted about at South Korea is just the pressures of racing at that level and the expectations of winning every single weekend, and kind of the mindset stuff around that as a young rider is maturing and kind of being in that position. And, when you set the bar as high as he has, there's only a few people in the world that have really been able to do that. So having somebody that can relate to what you're going through and give you little tips and kind of keep your mind focused on the things that it should be focused on and not on the things it shouldn't. I think those are the areas where I can offer some help to him. Keeping some of the pressure off of his shoulders and keeping the focus simple. And I've kind of been there, done that with everything. So I think being able to provide some perspective as well too is potentially like, reassuring or kind of calming in certain situations. So yeah, that's kind of like, I'm stoked to help him however I can throughout this season. And it'll mostly be those things. There's some little stuff that we've chatted about. He's well aware of his, any weaknesses he has on the track. And we've talked about some of those things. And, for him, things like he's a really strong finisher at the bottom of a track. And sometimes his first splits are a little bit slower. So getting out of the gate hard and kind of setting some little goals and things there that he can try to make some improvements. But for the most part, man, like, yeah, I don't have anything really to do with that kid's success in the past. He's made it all happen for himself, and Nico has been a huge help for him. But I'm excited to work with him, these next couple of years that we're teammates, and I think be able to provide some value in the unique areas where I'm able to.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, it seems like a really good team. And there's like good synergy there between all of you and what you're doing. So, do you think racers need a coach? And what makes a young rider progress fast?
I think everybody's different, and I think some riders probably benefit a lot more from a coach and some potentially less. I do think it's great to have an extra set of eyes on you. Assuming it's the right person. I think if you have the wrong coach, they can maybe make things worse than better. But for the most part, if people are in a position of coaching, I think they're usually decent to a certain level, and some are obviously really good. I've had people really help me out through my career, back in even the motocross days and stuff, like coaches that were super influential on me with mindset, with riding technique, like so many things that have carried over throughout my entire racing career that I give a ton of credit to.
In closing, if somebody follows this guide, what do you think matters the most?
I think everything matters that we've talked about. But I think at the end of the day, to say it the most simple way possible, if you keep the main thing, I think that is advantageous. And by that, I mean there's very little substitute for time on the bike. So I think if you can only do one thing, or if you had to focus on one thing, I think being on two wheels and riding and working those skills consistently, it probably is it's the biggest benefit of anything, right? Everything else is going to really help, and you're going to have to do all those things if you want to reach a certain level. But if you can be on the bike riding consistently, I think that's what ultimately we're trying to do. We're not trying to be the best at working out in the gym or doing all these other things, even though I think they are massively advantageous. If you can just be riding your bike, I think that will make you a better bike rider. Say it real simply.
Yeah. Muscle memory. It just really boils down to the muscle memory. Yeah. What should aspiring racers copy and or avoid copying from the pros, such as yourself?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think if you want to be the best at something, like if you're an aspiring racer and you want to do it at a really high level, you're going to have to work really hard at it. There's no substitute for that. You're not going to like luck into being, you know, a World Cup overall winner or something like that. Um, Everybody works hard and puts in a lot of time, a lot of years of riding, all that kind of stuff. So I think, you know, I'm fortunate to train some of the best kind of young up and coming athletes, or have worked with, I should say, some of like the best young up and coming riders in North America. And there is a serious conversation at some point where, you know, if you're trying to beat the guy next to you, what are you willing to do that they're not willing to do? Obviously talent and all these things come into it for sure, but I've rarely ever seen anything where somebody's winning really consistently. And, you know, especially if you're trying to become like the greatest to ever do it, that didn't work harder than just about everybody else, or for a long time. You know, like you kind of can't skip that step. You got to do a lot of good work for a long time to get to that level. Um, and that's the part of the job I obviously love. I love waking up every day, and I get paid to go to the gym and ride my bike and work out and eat healthy and do all these things. Like, that's the stuff I would kind of do for free. The racing is honestly more the part that feels like a job. Like the weekly routine that I have is unreal. I love doing all that stuff, but it is hard though. Like, and it does take a lot of discipline. And I've been doing it for a long time now. So I think that's important to, you know, be realistic about that. You know, I think if you're going to copy anything, copy the work ethic. And I think that'll take you a long ways in life, no matter what you're trying to achieve. um Things not to copy. I don't know, man. Like, I don't drink, I don't party, I don't get into all that stuff. And I think to each their own. For me, uh I love life, I love the things I do. That's not my area of enjoyment, or I feel like I get anything productive done there. So obviously everybody can make their own goals, but I think between that kind of stuff, social media, there's a lot of things in life that can distract you from where you really want to go. And I think as you get older, you look back and realize you don't have unlimited time, and time goes by pretty fast. And you can waste a lot of time doing that kind of stuff where you could be chasing your dreams and doing things that you really love to do. And you can just pass the hours scrolling on your phone and just doing things that don't really matter. So it's not that you maybe don't do any of it, but it's maybe just be mindful of where you put your time and what you really want to do eventually, because there's plenty of distractions out there to sidetrack you from where you really want to go. So I would say be mindful of that. And yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. What should people stop overthinking?
Uh, Everything we just talked about. I think that there's benefit in every single one of these areas for sure. But like we said, the consistency of doing these things is more important than the exact, you know, workout you do, the exact tire you run, the PSI you have, the, you know, the type of bread you eat in the morning. Like, it is important to dig into all these details, because there's time to be found and improvements to be made. But at the end of the day, you've got to make it happen when it's time to get in the gate and go fast for 4 minutes. And there's a point where you can overthink all these little details to a point that it's not helpful. You know what I mean? Like, it's becoming a hindrance. Like, if you don't have every little thing done in just the right perfect way and check every single box, then now all of a sudden we're struggling with confidence. And that's another thing. As much as you try to get your race routine and your sleep and everything as perfect as you can, very rarely does a World Cup weekend go perfect from day one to finish a race. Like, I've won plenty of World Cup races on 1 to 2 hours of sleep because I couldn't sleep the night before. And you got to make it happen when it's time to make it happen. You get sick on the flight over, you know, you have bike issues, you crash your last practice run and bend everything up and don't get to try that line you wanted to try before the race. Like, there's so many things that are constantly moving around, injuries you're riding through, like all that stuff. So I think you can overthink the details and feel like, I think the riders are the strongest or the ones that go after all those things. But at the end of the day, they're racers, and they can also make it happen when everything's not going right. You know, any weather conditions, any any day, any whatever. So I think at the end of the day, you kind of got to be mentally tough to, like I said, go after those things, but not overthink it. There isn't a secret in any of those one areas. It's just doing everything the best you can do it.
What makes someone truly ready to race?
Try
Yeah,
to bang my computer at the dish over here, but
nice.
yeah, the one thing that makes somebody truly ready to race, I think, is just the willingness to give it a shot. I don't really think there's any magical answer. I think as long as you can make it down the trail safely, you can race, because that's really all you're doing is trying to do a run from the top to bottom. So if you have the ability to do that, then I think if you feel like you want to race, then go for it. I think you'll learn a ton. There's no better, learning experience and exposing of weaknesses, I feel like, than when you get on the clock. It doesn't hide anything. As long as you can kind of self-control and, not ride way over your limits, I think, you can start at just about any level. So yeah, I think just the willingness to do it and the ability to get down the hill, it's really not that difficult to, overthink, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I tell all my friends this. I think everybody should try to race, even just a beginner race. It'll teach you so much. I learned so much about fitness, how far you can push it without gassing out. I mean, there's so many different things, and it does put you out of your comfort zone. And I always agree, or I've always believed that you only grow when you put yourself in uncomfortable situations. You know, with obviously, you got a safety there, but sometimes it's good to get out of your comfort zone a little bit and push it. You can grow a lot from that. So,
Yeah, for sure. And I think like just kind of getting ego out of the way a bit too is like so many people are like good riders and are like, oh, I don't want to race. And I'm like, no, you just don't want to get beat. But I'm like, dude, you're racing the like 40-year-old cat three, like, are you trying to like, who are you trying to impress? You know what I mean? It's like, it doesn't matter. Like, unless you're competing for World Cup wins, a race result really doesn't mean anything. It's a personal test to yourself, right? Like, who are you trying to stack up by? Like, nobody's sitting in the finish line being insanely impressed by a cat 3 rider crossing the finish line, but that's not the point. Like, the point is that you're challenging yourself and you're growing and you're improving and you're overcoming like the pressure of racing and like going through that process. If that's something you feel like you want to do, I think that's what's so cool about it. I think people get too wrapped up into their results, when even at the World Cups, to be honest, you sit in the finish line and outside of the couple of guys that are fighting for the win, like, you come down all frustrated in 14th place and they drop another rider right behind you 30 seconds later. It's like, and you go back to the pit. It's like, what are you really doing? You know what I mean? It's a personal kind of test against yourself. And I think if you can keep it fun and simple to that point, and I think that makes it fun. You know what I mean? It's a more of a personal challenge. I mean, obviously it's fun to win. That's why I race. I don't like getting beat. I hate it. But it's I do think that the fear of failure, which in most people's minds is not getting a good result, is like not a reason to not progress. I think you got to be okay with coming up a little bit short, or things not going great or getting beat by whoever. It's like, who cares? It's like, I think that will limit your growth as a rider and a racer more than anything. So
yeah. Well said. For me, I just always like to challenge myself in anything
yeah,
that I do. I think that's kind of important, and it kind of stacks up. Like, where do I sit? I can look at the scores. You can look at the time. So,
totally.
final advice on anybody's downhill race riding journey. All the years experience you've had, everything that you've done at the highest level to, coaching, juniors, like, what would be the last takeaway final advice?
I think if I had to say one thing that's been true for me, and it's going to sound maybe a bit cheesy or whatever, but I would say just to have fun and enjoy it. I've loved riding my bicycle or anything with two wheels since I was 3 or 4 years old. I still love it now, probably as much or more than ever. Like, even going out to the bike park by myself and just doing laps, like, with no goals but to just enjoy being on my bike. It's like, I enjoy it so much that it is a lot of hard work in my position, or for anybody that's really wanting to like progress a lot and like set goals and stuff. But I think if you love it, the hard work is, you're happy to do it. And I think, if you're working really hard at something you don't like, we'll put it this way, it's probably not going to last very long. So I think keeping bike riding fun, because that to me is what it is. Downhill is like the most fun form of mountain biking that you can do. I love it.
Yep, I agree.
So continuing to have fun, you can work on techniques every time you go, and again, do all the things. But at the end of the day, we ride because it's fun. So make sure you leave time to just ride for fun and aren't, constantly in a classroom setting, so to speak,
Yeah,
when you ride. Don't take the fun out of it, because at the end of the day, that's what it is. So I would say, yeah, keep that important.
you got to have the passion, right?
Yeah.
If you're going to work that hard. Yeah. Well, Aaron, thank you so much. I think this is a really good guide. I know we went way over, but I appreciate it. And I think everybody else will appreciate it from any level of rider. There's so much good information here. So I want to thank you for giving me the time. And now I'm going to start training for the race. So,
Sounds good, man.
yeah.
Enjoy. And I'd say one last tip too. If you're training for a big race, try to do some smaller races before it, because
Okay.
that is the thing. I mean, you can practice and practice and practice, but racing is a different thing, and being comfortable on the clock is that's a whole different game. So if you can find some smaller races nearby, even if it's a Thursday night race thing like they used to do at Mammoth, or some of the local races at Big Bear, or if you can't do any of that, put one of those finger swim timers that you can use when you're in the pool on your handlebar, and press go before you go down a lap, just a couple of times. Like, just try to get a couple runs on the clock, because you'll notice it feels a little different. So I think incorporate a bit of that into your race prep for the bigger race, and probably be a little further along as well.
I've been running Strava when I really
There
want
you
to kind of like time a lap or something like that. Yeah. So
go.
see how I'm doing. Like, oh, I'm doing okay today, or oh man, I'm not even close. So yeah,
Yep. Yep. You
awesome,
can do a couple little races. It's always good. You can hear the beeps, have a start, have to sit around a little bit before you run. It's like kind of go through that routine a bit.
nice. Yeah, yeah. So thank you so much, Aaron. I really
Yeah,
appreciate it.
man. No worries, dude. Good questions.